What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce you all to MK Ultra, Split Consciousness and Secret Space Program, child trafficking and organized abuse survivor, whistleblower and overcomer, loving mother, hiker and homesteader, published writer and author, host of her own podcast, creator and developer of her own growing and thriving Patreon community, independent researcher, vocal performance extraordinaire, remote viewer, and psionic warrioress, Veronika Lynne. Veronika Lynne's life began in shadows she was never meant to see. Born into a legacy of hidden hands, 3 generations deep in occult ties and intelligence webs, her earliest years unfolded in the sterile halls of places like Bay Area labs and the candlelit circles of secret societies, all under the long shadow of MK Ultra. The infamous CIA mind control machine, born in the 1950s to fracture and reprogram human will, claimed her before she could even walk. Stanford, Berkeley, Half Moon Bay, these were just some of her nurseries, where trauma-based conditioning splintered her psyche and where her psychic gifts were forged into weapons for a program that never officially ended. Spokane offered no sanctuary, only deeper exploitation and the first whispers of a split consciousness program, often called the Secret Space Program, as many of you have probably heard. This classified offshoot of MK Ultra didn't just weaponize the mind, it weaponized the soul across timelines, dimensions, and even planets. For 2 decades, Veronika lived a double existence. By day, a gifted musician with a voice that could silence rooms, and by night, or in the erased hours in between, she was a remote viewer tracking emerald mines in Colombians' chaos, a conduit in blood-soaked rituals, and a commodity in underground playgrounds for the elite, human and otherwise. Beneath California's mountains, she trained in psychic warfare inside clandestine facilities. High in secret peaks, she touched the consciousnesses of an ancient ark. At 30, the 20 and back ended. She thought she was free. Unbeknownst to her, she was not. Healing, however, cracked the vault. A car crash in Bulgaria, dreams that bled into waking life, and the steady hand of fellow SSP whistleblower, Michael, unlocked the flood. Memories returned, not as fragments, but as revelations, each one a key. And then at 37, the final shock, she discovered she was still active and being activated. A shadow agent, a dissociative operative designed to bury truth. But love, real, defiant love, shattered the script. An alter named Christine tore down the walls. They exposed the handlers, escaped the web, and survived under unseen protection. Today, Veronika is no longer the asset. She is the architect of liberation. Through her groundbreaking memoir, Out of Sight, her thriving Patreon, and the revolutionary audio worlds of Scion, she blends survivor fire with cutting-edge science and ancient wisdom. She touches dream sovereignty, deprogramming, and the reclamation of altered states, tools forged from the same MK Ultra and SSP technologies that once enslaved her, now reversed to set others free. Every intuitive reading, binaural journey, and memory support session is a torch passed to the awakening. From a child engineered in the deep web of MK Ultra to a woman who dismantled the secret space program's grip on her soul, Veronika Lynne proves the unbreakable truth. No system can own a spirit that remembers its name. She is not just surviving history, she is rewriting the future of human consciousness, one liberated dream at a time. The revolution begins the moment we close our eyes and choose to see. Now she remembers, now she's free, and now she's showing the rest of us how to wake up. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd like to give just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, if you wanted to share any information privately with me, or if you were interested in submitting a written testimony to be featured in a Substack article, you can reach out to me via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. I've also started up my YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to me there at the handle at Imagination Podcast Official that I'm now streaming new episode premieres from weekly. Turn on your notifications and join our loving community in the live chats every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Central Time. Thank you all on the other side of the screen wholeheartedly for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me and to every guest on this show. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, walking miracle, overcomer and thriver, victim and survivor advocate, content creator, cycle breaker, dream curator, conspiracy decoder, and a woman using her powerful voice to break chains and to harmonize collective consciousness and psychic evolution in every corner of the world. The one, the only, Veronika Lynne. Veronika, it is an honor to have you on. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Emma. Thank you for that incredible intro. It kind of floors you as you're listening to it. It's really wonderful. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
It's amazing the testimonies that you and others have. And, you know, it probably is really shocking to hear or even to read things that you write yourself and to be like, wow, I went through all of that, you know, and I'm here today after all of it. It's really inspiring. And I know people listening are going to get so much hope and inspiration hearing where you came from to where you are today. So I wanted to hand it over to you. I'm really thrilled to get into your story. Like I was saying in the intro for people listening, Veronika does have a thriving and amazing Patreon community, YouTube channel where she's curating content there. She has her own websites, and she has an incredible memoir that I'm going to have in the show notes for you guys that we'll talk about today. But I thought maybe we'd start today in your story by going back to that awakening moment at age 33, and we'll sort of start unwinding your story from when you remembered.
Absolutely. Yes, it's been quite a journey. Patreon has become quite a wonderful community for me, as well as all the people in my groups. Many of them are survivors as well, and we're actually studying the potential of the dream space and how the government and agencies and occult societies know how to use our dream space for influencing and training. And we'll be discussing this later as to how I got into that. But it's an amazing spot. I also offer, for survivors, I offer memory help on my website, spacemystic.com, to help those who are trying to put their memory in a timeline of how to remember, techniques that I learned over the years that are very effective. So I hope to see some of you in these platforms. This all began, for many of you, the reason why I like to start sometimes of where, what happened to me when I started to remember, I like to share because a lot of my clients, it's similar. You know, I was having, kind of a spiritual awakening, you'd say. You start to, I was dabbling in a lot of, meditation and, life transformation. However, it all kind of coalesced when I had a gigantic car crash in Bulgaria with my family in the car. And soon after this, my psychic ability started to just amplify. I'd already had some throughout my life that I couldn't understand my gifts back then, but they started to amplify. I reached out to a teacher. I started studying with her privately to help harness these gifts that were suddenly online very fast. And also memories started flooding in. So around 33 years old, memories flooded in dreams first, because as I've come to understand, the subconscious mind, when your conscious mind can't accept things and memories in your life, most likely because they're too horrific or traumatic, your subconscious mind can still plant breadcrumbs for you in the dream world. And it doesn't mean necessarily, actually almost never, a dream is not going to explicitly spell out a memory for you. It's always going to be a collection of dreams that have the same theme or little breadcrumbs of where the location might have been. So I started having these flood in for about a year. And then after that, I did some just a light amount of hypnotherapy. I was grappling with the realization in these dreams. Largely, the memories from these had to do with abuse at the hands of my father, which we can dive into when we kind of wind back to the beginning. So this year helped me understand, oh, I finally understand what my father was doing to me as a child. However, what happened was about a year later, I started having what I call conscious memory recall, which is when you're just walking through your normal day, bam, you get hit with a memory or a bank of memories. I call them a cluster, where you're not meditating, you're not asleep, you're not in a hypnagogic state as you go to sleep, you're not in hypnotherapy. It's just a normal part of your day, and you get pelted in the head. It feels like a BB gun, like it hits you really fast, bam, 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 and it's 10 to 15 fragments of memories would come in. And at the time, I had no idea of what they were referring to. And also, some of them didn't make sense. So those started me on a whole new rabbit hole of I couldn't have been on that train as an 8-year-old because my mother said I never took a train in my life. Those kind of memories. And you start to wonder. So this led me to, serendipitously finding testimonies from, some of people like Jason Rice, um, where they too had these strange memories coming in dreams or coming in that they couldn't place, and it helped them figure out their testimony. And so I started to research about secret space programs, about MK Ultra, about um, these types of testimonies that would help me understand. I didn't think at the time I'd had a kind of split consciousness experience or secret space, but it was helping me understand what could have happened. I did get in contact with a well-known whistleblower. I'm keeping his name private in this session. It doesn't mean people that know me and research, they'll be able to put 2 and 2 together of who this person is. He's not hidden. It's just for me, it helps me speak with clarity without saying his name and bringing his persona into it for now. But I contacted him because when I saw his testimony online, some of his testimony mirrored exactly what I had remembered. And they were certain elements where, such as the tag program in schools, this memory had flooded back. So I messaged him and I said, "Can I have a consult with you? I'm really desperate. I'm so lost with all these memories." And he was so gracious to help me understand how to build a memory timeline, how to work with your memories in a very specific way and get them down on a timeline that makes sense. And also, um, how to start looking at other memories that didn't make sense, how to see how they might fit in to my real timeline, my normal. So it was largely due to his work and my perseverance and stubbornness of putting together a timeline. And it did take me a good 6 months of working with my memories in a very, I'll say, with integrity. So I was very careful to ever go down a rabbit hole and start, you can make up memories. There are things, you can really harm yourself if you're not careful about memory work and doing it in a specific way. So that when I started my memory timeline and I started remote viewing for his groups. And this is where we started to bond. And I was a very natural remote viewer from the first couple of viewings. And I'm still remote viewing for him today in his professional groups. And I didn't understand then, to me, it was, oh my God, look at, it was so amazing. And now, of course, knowing what I know, it's not so amazing. But we formed a bond. And then through our shared experiences and realizing we had been in some of these same programs, even some of the same locations, we've started to fall in love. And so we were moving forward as normally, but not understanding, which we'll get into later, that we really were influenced to come together from the very beginning. And both of us were part of a large operation, and he was really more the victim of that, and I was being utilized in a dissociative state. So we ended up moving to Sedona together and starting this life. We had no idea yet what was going on, and we were, researching, writing, developing all our platforms. And then the dam broke, and we realized what we were in, and that we were really in a dangerous situation, which we'll get into. And that's where I'm at. So now I'm trying to work with this memory bank of who I really was, as an asset, a shadow agent for intelligence agencies. And that will be a new book. But I still am getting those memories. And so I'm not as eloquent when I speak about them. So that's where I'm at right now.
Incredible. And I love that love is part of your story. Love really does set us free. And it's such a beautiful thing. Although that had to have been so tumultuous, which I know we'll talk about it later, but sort of figuring out that there was kind of a strategy behind the people that you meet. That's always a really hard part of these testimonies to hear, is the friendships, the relationships, even family. That seems so authentic and organic. And later on, you find out it was a strategy, and it was something that was pre-planned to happen, these encounters and meetings and relationships. And I'm so grateful that you guys were able to see through that and still come together despite it. How cool.
It's so wild. It's really, we wake up in the morning with our coffee every morning. What did that really happen? Yes, and we're fighting it together.
To be we're so pissed. Yeah. We're like, darn it, our plan didn't work, and they still love each other. Exactly. So let's go back in time and reverse engineer your story a little bit. You mentioned your father was the main perpetrator, at least the one that began the process of you getting into these systems, but it sort of went back a little bit more in your story, maybe not clear on the exact kind of relationships that happened, or maybe how deep the mind control penetrated the different levels of your family. But maybe we could talk a little bit about the history and sort of what you believe led to your birth and your generation being put into these different programs.
Sure. Yeah, we can take it back. It's my information about my mother and father is pretty limited. When I'm trying to dig for information about how they most likely were influenced or abused in some way. Mostly I focus on my father, because my mother, even if she was influenced or abused, I believe she was really a victim to all of this. And she really had red flags my entire childhood and did her best to try and understand what was happening in a situation that was not possible. She was not going to be, told what was happening. And also she could be, I have reason to believe that there was conditioning happening to her slowly over years, so that she would forget, or she wouldn't be able to put it together, or any amount of things. So mostly what I was studying was my father and his family. And the real central character in all of that is his father. And he is a kind of a red flag. Everything that I found out about him, I didn't meet him before his death. So I had to research, and my father has also passed. So I can't ask him as well. But he was the general manager for Matson Shipping in the 50s, I believe. And Matson Shipping was one of the largest international shipping companies at the time. It was a very, very important man, with all things to do about port security, transfer of goods, be they illegal or not. He was also on the advisory for the Navy for port security on the California coast. And so undoubtedly, undoubtedly he was also working with intelligence agencies for national security or for more nefarious agendas as well. He died suddenly. He had a very sudden death. I wouldn't be able to prove that it was, of ill intent, but it was very strange. My grandmother, after that point, became manically depressed and drank herself to death. They had a lot of money, but she ended up having a very sad end. So again, something there that she couldn't handle, some kind of truth. A lot of darkness in the family photos when I look at their pictures. But again, a lot of this is, speculation. I have to try and, put the dots together to support all the memories that I have. And my father's childhood was very strange, but he was extremely intelligent, like a very, very high IQ, athletic beyond, amazing, like a physical intelligence. He had a severe stutter in his early years, but it's his behavior. Looking at him later, he suffered from really wasn't mentally well. He was charming and very intelligent, but you could tell that there was something very fractured in his being, and he could have suffered from DID or but of course this wouldn't have just been from mind fracturing, but also a lot of the dark things he did that probably weighed on his conscience as he got older. So that's where that, and the other element that I forgot was that his father's side were all Mormon, and his father was, very, very associated with the Mormon church in the Bay Area. And some of the memories I have of being in a cult type setting makes sense. It was up there in San Francisco where there would have been these old blood ties. So that was the other red flag about my father's history. On my mother's side, largely her family all were very active in the armed forces. So there is that element that I could have been, managed or profiled from a young age because of her side being in the armed forces.
And what, for your father, what was his, I guess, profession, and did it connect to your grandfather's work where he would have, that patterning of having those intelligence connections would have been passed down to him?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. My father's father died when he was only 12.
Oh,
And so whatever legacy he would have gone into was suddenly gone. However, I think that my father, I suspect that he was in something like Project Bluebird. I do believe MK Delta was functioning in San Francisco up until a certain, I think, mid 60s. I'd have to find that evidence again. But I believe that he had some kind of experimentation done on him, or perhaps a mind fracturing, but he was in their files. So I think they were watching all these years, watching to see what he would do, influencing him here and there. And then I think at some point, in all of this, my father gets into illegal activities. So this I'm still trying to piece together. But by the time I was born, he was a full-blown sex addict, pedophile, wasn't doing a lot of drugs that I know, but it was mostly this very perverse sex addiction. I believe he was making child pornography. Now, I think at some point, either agencies had kind of kept him in this loop and used him, or he was doing these things illegally and they caught him and brought him into the fold and said, either you can work with us and you can make this kind of terrible videos for us, or we're going to imprison you. And so he got wrapped up in a very dark society, and he started bringing me into that as an infant. So his work, the only very strange thing he did, he was always a freelancer. This is also indicative of anyone who might be working as a, even a low-level patsy for intelligence agencies, they always stay freelance. They never get too entrenched in a 9-to-5 job. And one of his jobs for a decade, he was working at Stanford University in the front mailroom, which is interesting. At that time, I believe Stanford had not split. Stanford Research Institute, I believe, was still a part of Stanford University at this point. And it makes a lot of sense if intelligence agencies are using you, having you in the mailroom where you can see every piece of correspondence going in and out is very important. The day I was born, the year I was born, they gave him a really big severance package and said, thank you. And he left. So those are all red flags for me. But he was right there. So he seemed to have been a part, by the time I was born, a part of occult societies in the Bay Area, some kind of intelligence agencies, and also just brought me into his own very dark acts, of visiting strip clubs, of, hiring whores, of perhaps, child pornography, although I don't have specific memories of that.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. You're able to piece all of that together despite not having both of, your grandparents and your father's testimony. Who knows, like you said, they could have been dissociative too, or even involved and maybe wouldn't have disclosed information to you. Right. But that's really incredible what you've been able to piece together yourself, especially since it seems also like your mother may have dissociated some of what happened as well and didn't know everything. Also, she wasn't brought into the fold like you were. So she probably didn't know a lot either. And that's really incredible what you've been able to put together. And so you had a family that on one side was, entrenched in these different sectors of society that could have been beneficial to the next generation to kind of pass that on. And eventually, once you were born, this became something that was sort of full blown and potentially due to your father's illegal activities, which Kathy O'Brien talks about that. That same thing happened to her father. And there's plenty of testimony out there that vividly describes how perpetrators are brought into the government, CIA, and MK Ultra programs because they do what a lot of people don't want to do. They have no trouble abusing children and doing, things that can fracture a child's mind, where a healthy human being, isn't able to do things like that. So you see how the CIA hired perpetrators and people willing to do that to help further these programs, the research, and to help, further the development or conditioning of children that they wanted to use. And so let's talk about your early childhood and even your birth, if there's anything you want to share about your birth, anything strange that happened or any dates. But let's talk about that and even your early childhood, what you remember and when this all began.
Yeah, great. Well, to be honest, the memories, again, I didn't have any of these memories until about 33. So I largely had maybe 2 or 3 memories I could remember over my life of this time. And the troubling part about it is that it happened almost immediately, as a baby. I mean, as a little teeny toddler, being brought to research institutions, occult societies, like in remote lodges in the mountains, sometimes right in the city in San Francisco. And we were living in Woodside, which is kind of close to Redwood City. But it's a stone's throw away from Menlo Park, from all of these, from the Half Moon Bay Air Force Station. And so the only, one of the strangest memories I had was of awakening to or maybe 2 or 3, of awakening to this very sophisticated understanding of the world. All of the sudden, I came online, but it was not from a 2 or 3-year-old's perspective. It was like an adult waking up in my mind. And this probably came from the mind fracturing that was happening, because when you're fractured, one part of yourself becomes uninhibited by any society, any societal parts. You have your core self, and I've grown up, and I did all the things I'm supposed to, and but the fractured part is almost from another world. Like there's a freedom they have and an understanding. They can also collect data, and be kind of connected, like to what you might call the ether or the the astral world. It's just a different being. So I remember that vividly. But there was a lot of horror happening to me. So I was very difficult, I was crying all the time, couldn't speak yet, and but I was also very stubborn, very strong. And so this thread of that strong, these genes, probably from my mother's Scottish side, very determined to have things go my way, which did save me much later, in the operation in Sedona. So things were messy at home, chaotic. The relationship between my mother and father was very, it became basically sexless overnight. My brother was also, my half brother was involved, but I'd prefer not to, speak about him too much. But it was just a very messy time. And I can share some pictures if you want of some of the places I found I was. It's in my book. I can do a share screen if you like. My father was specifically taking me to different types of places to program me to be used as an asset later in life. It may have affected. It may have been designing me to be a potential secret space program candidate. I'm not sure, but I know for sure that this training was meant to make me as like a dissociative Manchurian candidate kind of person. And this was done. So the mind fracturing is useful for both occult societies and intelligence agencies. And indeed, the intelligence agencies learned most of what they know about this from occult societies. They've known about this for millennia. And so he was taking me to research institutions, and I can show some pictures, but that mostly for testing, training. There were some medical procedures done that were minor. And the occult societies was twofold. It was to enhance mind fracturing, trauma-based grooming, and then also to establish my role within a specific occult society in their rituals, in their ceremonies, so that as I grew up older, I would still remain a part of this occult society, and used as a ritual figurehead. And it was not always traumatic, so it wasn't always dark. These were often, and these are newer memories I've been unsurfacing, but a lot of the occult ceremonies are sex magic. They're not all, not all of them do the horrific things of child sacrifice and, and summoning entities. A lot of what I was involved in seems to be more around the sex magic aspect, which of course is horrible because there's still children involved. But as you get older, you move out of those ranks, especially once you hit puberty, because you become a liability if you're pregnant, and so you have to. They do impregnate some, but I don't believe I was ever impregnated. However, so those are the places he was taking me, and using me in any way he could, selling me for money in any way he could. So also to private entities, men with a lot of money who lived in the woods. So he basically did whatever he could and got ensnared in some very dark societies.
Some of these institutions that you mentioned, like Stanford Research Institute or Stanford University, even a couple of the other places that are in your testimony as well. Some of them we've heard multiple times. Others, some of these places are a little bit new. I was wondering, remember were you being used for the same things? Was the conditioning sort of the same at each facility? I know, for example, Stanford Research Institute, a lot of testimony comes out about remote viewing. Do you
Right.
remember specific programs that were being run out of these institutions?
Those, I want to say, they're yes, I think what really surprised me from my memories compared to other older testimonies is that by the time 1987, 88, 89 came around, it was a well-oiled machine. It 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 it's like so much research had been done in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and prior to that, that the late 80s, I just remember being it well-oiled. So I did some preliminary testing, and then they knew. They're like, "Oh, good. Okay, now we need to do this. Boom, 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 boom." So it wasn't like, I'll say in the more research institutions, it wasn't the grueling, um, experimentation that was done on people prior to my generation. They already
Okay.
knew what to do. It was like, boom, boom. Here's the drug. There was a drug I know for sure that they had found that would compound the fracturing process. It would make it much faster. And that I still have to remember what it was. Even if I did, I might not want to say it, but the it was like going into these places. They knew exactly what to do, and that it was different because something at Berkeley, that the space science laboratory there, which is amazing. And understand that all of these entities, all of these agencies and institutions were in the Bay Area. So, I mean, 20 minutes from each other, 30. Ames was there, NASA, um, Lockheed Martin, um, at Stanford, Berkeley. I mean, they're all right there. So they all work together. They share their scientists, they share their data. There's a protocol they all know. And so Berkeley, this one was a bit darker. It was a very difficult, dark memory. It seems like here, it was like the culmination of a lot. I remember feeling like there was no turning back after this one. So that might have been where I finally split, where maybe there was an altar that was really created, and it was maybe so traumatic there to lose that part of myself. Could have been something like that. And a lot of the more grueling, a darker mind fracturing, and would I associate more with the occult societies there. And at the Half Moon Bay, it was a very different experience. It's in my book. I do believe that I actually went underground there. There was a makeshift kind of laboratory, and I have pictures, but it was really an entrance to a train system underground that runs through the whole Bay Area, which, of course, many other people have talked about, these massive train systems, the underground travel in America, such as Gene Decode, talks a lot about that. So I think that was an entrance. So, different places served as different hubs, but they all worked together.
Do you remember being taken to military bases or anywhere else in specific that you were able to remember? I know you mentioned some lodges and sort of some other different properties that you were taken to. And some I'm sure you don't even know. It sounds like your father trafficked you to other people in the network too, which I'm sure could have been in homes or remote areas that were harder to kind of pinpoint. But do you remember being taken to any other locations outside of the kind of university institution settings?
Oh, yes, I have many memories. I'm working very hard to find the locations. That takes time, and it takes a lot of surfing, looking through my notes. So what happens when a memory comes in is I draw it down, and then I'll spend months searching on Google Earth for areas nearby, and also dreams will give me breadcrumbs, little breadcrumbs of location. over many months. Some of those include a facility nearby that was functioned as more of a medical facility, but it was really high up in some bluff or mountain area, which is interesting. The Bay Area, I think the first mountains are really the Santa Cruz mountain range, if I'm correct. So it might have been in that area. But it served as a facility, and I remember entering as a child, very little, maybe 2, 3, 4. I was drugged because I was very calm, very calm. I mean, just, and they were doing a medical procedure there. I don't know that it would have been anything too invasive, because there couldn't have been a lot of scarring, because I would go home to my mother the same day, unless she had some kind of programming happening herself. But that was a very specific, when I tried to understand, I dug for, there's a protocol we can talk about later about probing my memories, almost like a remote viewing session where you're completely neutral and you're trying to grab data from a neutral space. It showed me a symbol and a couple words, which was very interesting. It showed me a word of MSIC, which is a missile base run by the DIA. But that location is in, I'd have to look it up. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. I think it's in Alabama. So now I could go down the rabbit hole and say, oh boy, that's another memory maybe from a secret space thing. I don't think that's what it was. I think that the facility was run by the DIA. And the programming was happening. And the DIA has really interesting access to a lot of, it's not spoken about a lot. The CIA is, but the DIA was definitely involved as well in all of my memories. And the others are private lodges, definitely within that Santa Cruz Mountain kind of area around Woodside, Redwood City, lodges that would be used for whatever ceremonies, big parties, and I don't recall any specific people from that time, any specific, famous people or anything. But I think that's about it. Other facilities. Yeah.
California, it's such a hub. You have Disney out there,
Yeah.
and like you said, just even in your area, Lockheed and all these different, big corporations that people all over the country know by name, and universities that people, they're just trying so hard to get into throughout high school, and these really revered institutions and universities. And it's really scary that there's sort of a duality that goes on, that kind of the more revered something is, a lot of times the darker the shadow that is cast over it, and there's something more nefarious going on, and sort of the recognition and reverence of it is to kind of cover that up.
Yeah. And it's extensive. And in my book, I discuss a bit of the history of, I was trying to find the page here, but the history of Stanford Research Institute, but also Ed May and his involvement with a couple different companies there, that right when I was living there from 1987 to 1993, all these companies were transforming, and one specifically under Ed May went to Stanford Research Institute. And then the involvement of SAIC in this area, which is a Department of Defense subcontractor. I kind of go into the history about how they're all related, and who and how it, exactly as you said, had incorporated this intense funding to militarize remote viewing. I think by the time I got in, I think they understood it. But it was a push to militarize, to really start this kind of psychic warfare.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that you're being taken to all these different locations. You have all this testing that's going on. You're being taken to occult ceremonies and rituals, You're also
Yeah.
being abused at home and being taken to people's homes. And at the
Yeah.
same time, you have this day life. You're still going to school. You're still
Yes.
living kind of this normal life, and
Yeah.
nobody, including yourself, knows what's happening in the shadows. What was
Yeah.
that day life like? I know you mentioned you were placed in gifted and talented in school. I mentioned in the
Right.
intro you had and have an incredible voice and pursued singing for a lot of your life, and potentially
Right.
maybe and hopefully you still do sing. But what was childhood like during the day life, and what do you remember about gifted and talented?
So at 5 years old, my mother was really alarmed by my behavior. So I was really screaming and crying at all the daycares I went to, all the preschools.
Oh,
Um, and it's partially my personality too, being very independent and stubborn, but also because of the trauma that was being done. And she was so alarmed, couldn't put her head around it, that she moved my brother and I up to Spokane, Washington. It was her attempt, I think, to get out of something very dark. She wasn't able to finalize a divorce with my father, even though she was really worried. But there was just something not right. When I look back, I'm thinking, this poor woman, I don't think she would have been able. I think that my father had her and I under a spell. You know what I mean? Well, not a spell, but under some kind of mind influencing, and or perhaps a spell. You never know. The occult magic and all these things are intertwined. Um, so we moved up there, and but it all just started. It just started up there again. Once my dad, he was away from us for, I can't remember how long, maybe 6 months, but then he joined us, and it all began again there. So mostly up there in Spokane, I recall at those young ages, 5, 6, 7, um, very mostly being kind of sold to private entities too. Um, but I think by this point I could cope, I could understand, I could speak. Like there, at this point you can start to dissociate really well. When you're a little child, you can't. It's all, it's hard for you to manage the trauma. But as I got older, I could manage it. I started to um, those years 5 to 10 were not too, like, I want to say that weren't as terrible as once 10 hit, something really, really was bad. But it was almost like I could manage with it. I started to sing. My whole family are musicians, classical and jazz. And while I do love that part of myself, it's a part right now that I um, am grappling with, because I do think it was also a programming, because later in
mhm.
my life I would be sent as an opera singer around Europe, but I was being used as an asset in a dissociative state. So now looking back, I'm not so fond of this intense training I had from about 8 until, well, about 2028. Nonstop theater work, dance, singing. And that did at the time, I think, bring me some solace. But also I would come to understand that the certain classical music and certain jazz is used in the programming. So, which we can talk about later, but that I see that it was a part of my entire being from very early on. And at uh, at 10, so I did have trouble in school. I was a bit obstinate, but again, I think I was managing okay. I was managing the trauma. Um, I'd figured out a way to work with my dad and his many different dissociative states. You start to be able to know what to do. And then around 10, it just everything collapsed. Something in that year, 1997, and that's all detailed in my book as well. So many strange things happened. One of them being the tag program, where I was brought out of my classroom into the talented and gifted program, which I have a newspaper clipping I found to prove that it was functioning then. Um, and it was such a strange experience, and I had forgotten about it entirely until I was doing my memory work, and we were doing strange things like learning German. I mean, looking back, and now I understand why, if they're recruiting you for some kind of off colony space program, or Earth colony as well, which I would be recruited for later. Learning German, psychic little tests that you thought were games, but it was really testing some of your psychic abilities. Also, an intense profiling. So I understood that they already the after this. Well, let's see. I'll say what happened and then kind of circle back. Soon after this, I was brought to the Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane. I recall going on like a small white shuttle bus with a couple other students from the tag class. And these memories, it was further testing. I think there were some drugs involved. I'm not sure for what, if it was a because I'm certain there's a drug that helps with the with the mind fracturing process, or accessing a different part of yourself. But what was strange was that the I guess you could call them doctors that were there, they knew me, and they had a file, like a big, thick file. And of course, I didn't remember this until, after 33, when I was doing memory work, but they knew. And so in the tag program, what they're also doing is they are profiling you. They are seeing how you respond to fear, how you respond. Where are you in the societal structure of your class? Are you the leader? Are you the nerdy one that's going to stay in the background? Are you a warrior? Are you going to defend your friend? Are these types of things? And on my profile, I remember it was something like an audio memory of being selected too, because there was a bit of a kind of warrior spirit in me. The other two children that came were much softer, extremely smart. I mean, high IQ, very, very awkward kids that were with me. And they were smaller, and I was very tall and outspoken. And so there was a myriad of reasons for the tag program. At this time, I have a couple faint memories as well of Men in Black type figures appearing. Very fuzzy memory of one approaching me on the playground, and also one faint fuzzy memory of him being in the tag program, the room, kind of watching. And so that happened as well. I do believe I spun out. I have pictures of myself. Something happened with my father privately, or it could have been some sexual encounter that went really wrong, that was really bad and traumatic, that at 10 years old, when it happens to you at 3 or 4, you're going to not understand, right? But then when it happens to older, like something cracked. And I have poetry from that time that is very, very strange, sexual, dark. And that's where my story splits, because the last memory I had, I couldn't remember. I had no idea what it was. I thought it was a dream. So when you're doing memory work, often when you get a chunk of memory, you say, oh, I thought that was a dream from when I was little. And this is very known very well. But there was a dream I had or it was a dream I thought, that of being in this big cabin and having trucks come up and people and a giant bright light behind this cabin, and me kind of coming out. And then when I was doing the memory work, I started to bawl. I was probing the memory, and I was like, this is my house. How could I not remember that this was my house out in this like woods that my mom and I were living in? We're in a remote area. And so when I remembered that I was abducted from my house by, it looked like a couple of or a couple of extraterrestrial type beings. And when I remembered that, I thought, oh my God, now I have to start. Was I in a split consciousness program, which I call it an SCP instead of secret space program, because I don't think necessarily I was in space. And so that was my 10 years old. And then my story splits from there.
Let's dig into that a little bit, because then in the
Yeah.
coming years, you also have memories of being employed as a remote viewer for
Right.
U.S. supported paramilitary groups, and then also being used as a conduit to speak with Moloch during occult
Yes.
ceremonies. So this
Yeah.
was like, it seems like you were really being thrown, you had a lot of conditioning as a child, and
Yes.
now they're putting it into action now that you're blossoming into your, teenage years.
Yes. Yeah, this interesting that you say that too. There's some documents on the CIA reading room about the Chinese studying children for their ESP qualities, for these gifts of psychic work. And it's interesting. They said across the board that a girl is most active and correct with her psychic data from the age of 6 to about 12 or 13 when puberty hits. And they were, of course, doing this study to find out how to use children in these programs. So it's interesting you would say that, because at 10, they pushed me right into the front lines of the split consciousness program that they were hiring me, or not hiring, but taking me into. So this took me a long time to figure out, and it's even hard for me to speak about. The secret, the split consciousness program is tough to talk about, because you wake up every day and you think, am I insane? Every day, you're like, this can't have happened. And then you go look over your data, and you have to convince yourself in order to speak about your story. But at that point, at some point during one of my trips to Fairchild, I had a memory of being underground and looking at myself, a clone of myself, floating in like a tub of goo. And she had, like all these white what would you call them? Cords and things stuck to her all over. And I've had this haunting image my whole life. I've drawn it many times. And looking at her I didn't understand it until I understood about secret space programs and consciousness transfer technology. And so this was most likely the moment where they brought me in to, in essence, split my consciousness and put part of it in this clone that was there, right? This is how the technology is kind of described. And after that, there's some very fuzzy and dark. The hardest part for me to remember, was the most painful, from about 10 to immediately after. It was like I was put into like a kind of a sex ring. And here I do think I was sold to politicians moving through the Washington state area. So I was part of this ring in this kind of altered, so I'll call it my cloned state. I'll put it that way. But that's a very fuzzy time for me. And even now, I'd have to like go over my notes again. There was some kind of conditioning or something where it was like, to wherever I was going or what was doing, I was really needing to be desensitized to a lot of dark and heavy sexual activity. And I guess it makes sense, because after that, I was very quickly transferred after a lot of memory. And this is all detailed in my book a lot, about how I found out about where I was. It was a beautiful, very, very, very dark, but wonderful journey, finding out where was I, where were these memories? And I was transferred to Colombia at this time. Around 1997 is when a second wave of funding came from the Clinton administration to fund paramilitaries in Colombia. Of course, it was sold to us as a war on drugs. Of course, all your followers probably know that's not really what was happening. They were sending paramilitaries in to protect their drug production and protect cattle ranchers that owned large emerald mines and all of the political, very elite political factions of Colombia. So the paramilitaries were storming through, destroying the guerrilla factions and horrible, massacres of local people trying to get a hold and a dominance over this area. And I came in as to immediately start remote viewing. At that time, I didn't know it was called that. It was really like, because I hadn't had formal training. You have to understand that came later. I really was just using these raw psychic gifts as a girl. Sit down. They would, be like, the protocol was not strict like it would be for me later. It was really paramilitaries. I was rolling around with this wild bunch of men. And I believe a couple others were like me as well. But they would just sit you down. They'd say, you need to go and figure out, where is this faction moving? Where are they going to be tomorrow? And I'd have, I would sit down and get into a bit of a trance. I would look at maps. I think drugs were involved. I'm almost certain there was a special drug they were using to put me in that state fast. So that was what I was doing. I was looking for emerald mines. I was looking for movement of guerrilla factions, planes, air traffic, and also in this time was used. I was used sexually. I wouldn't say it was horrific. Like, I wouldn't say it was like a horrible. By this point, I was already, accustomed to it, but I was constantly under threat of being attacked by the second in command, who was a real, SOB, or constantly being harassed by different upper ups or people wanting to try and can we say, what do we say on here? Grape instead of the R word?
You can say anything you want. No censorship.
Oh, okay. But yeah, that would look for opportunities to rape me, but it wasn't, I don't remember it being horrific as actually it would, as it would get a little bit later on. So this was from about 10 years old to whenever I hit puberty. So about 13, 14. And then I shifted into a new role. Oh, and during this time, sorry, you had mentioned, I also was used because I'd been trained in the occult as well. You don't have to be trained, but I was. So there was an extra level to my services. It took me a long time to figure out where I was, but I finally figured out I had been brought to the Las Lajas Cathedral in Colombia, which, if you Google that, it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's this incredible cathedral. And that alone is a red flag. Why do they place it right here? However, I did a lot of research on that. It's in my book, but my main function there was to go and witness a ceremony. I do believe it was a child sacrifice ceremony that also brought in a entity that I communicated with, and I remember it. And it was the entity known as Malach, and that was an incredible. To remember these things and about the implications of what was really happening there, because there were political figures, there were off-world political figures, both from German off colonies and extraterrestrial colonies present at this. There were paramilitary, like higher up generals present, but also government officials from Colombia, and then also Vatican representatives. So for me, remembering all this and what it means to how these groups come together to perform these ceremonies, and the reason why is to contain control over a certain gridded area. They use what I believe, and I put all the research in here, is they pick specific spots around the globe that have extremely strong earth currents, either counterclockwise or clockwise. And when you do a ceremony, you can siphon the energy from it and siphon all kind of magic and influencing whatever. It kind of uses the cathedral, the steeple, as almost like an antenna, and it sweeps over a certain gridded area of the country. And what's really interesting is when you look at the height of cathedrals around the world, Las Lajas Cathedral is one of the top 100. It's one of the top. It is extremely tall. 30 of the tallest cathedrals are in Germany, the 30 of the top 100. And of course, there's others then in Brazil. So it's like a grid. And I wanted to study it. I had to wait until I had some more time. But I do believe that they were gridding, solidifying their alliances together, and especially for Latin America. And my book makes the argument that Latin America itself is basically an entire network unto itself, run by the German Fourth Reich and extraterrestrials. And then those are the main players. And then everybody else is just playing games with them, every other government in the world. At that time too, I do believe they were, after Las Lajas, things started to change. So I started to my role and my work changed, which we can go into. But that's what I remember of that time, from about 10 to 13.
Oh my goodness. I can't even fathom being thrust into that as an adult, even with training and stuff. It's so much to take on. And then to think about so young, you're still going to school, you've moved, you have a regular life. And then on the other hand, you are participating and being forced to do all of these just absolutely insane things that, are just unfathomable to consider at age 10 to 13, right down to being trafficked to these different ritual areas or being involved with military operations. Yeah. Do you have memories of training or conditioning that you were used or that you had to go through to sort of, I guess, do these different tasks? Do you remember the conditioning that you had, or what types of things would they do to train a small child for such responsibilities?
Yeah, the real training for the remote viewing, like the most official, would happen later at 18. So, and then I would be contracted to the Air Force in America. But before that, as a child, a lot of it, from 0 to 5 is one thing, because there was a lot. You're so young that they're doing a lot of creating altars. They're nurturing your psychic abilities. They're having you build confidence. But at that age, you don't know what you're doing. You just think it's all games. And getting rewarded for when you do well, you start to learn. Like a dog, when you're doing stuff well, you get a treat, and when you don't, you don't. I don't recall. I think that the more advanced training happened at Fairchild Air Force Base before I went into the split consciousness program. So before all of it happened, because I remember there were games. There was like a red light, something to do with a red light. I don't know if that was a hypnotizing apparatus, but there was some kind of game. I remember the kids were kept separate. We were all working. I do remember some kind of goggles being used. So there could have been, VR type training for a variety of things, also preparing me for going into a war situation. What do you do? And so you subconsciously go into these things. Like, you can learn so fast. The technology to learn fast is there in these armed forces and secret programs. It takes you one day to learn something that would take you a year here, because of the efficacy on your subconscious mind. So that, I think, is where they heightened abilities and got me prepared for this kind of intense warfare. Also, it was in my personality. So that was the profile. They wouldn't have sent the soft, sweet kid next to me. So I think they they knew that I'd be able to handle it psychologically. Yeah.
Were they having you do actual remote view sessions where you were tasked with doing something seriously at that time, or was it more practice and conditioning before your role changed?
They threw me in the front line. So at around 10, 11, I was down in Colombia, and it was wild. I mean, these were wild frontline men. And I mean,
Oh my gosh.
and so I think there was one man that I kind of vaguely remember him being called like El Capitan or something like that. And so he was in charge of me. I was purchased, and I was under his watchful eye. I was oddly, it was like a weird father figure. I was also very attracted to him. But I think that he was really in charge of the sessions, you'd call them. And he would snap at all the other guys and be like, get the F out of here. We're doing, and it was, but I think that it was largely drug induced. So, which is not effective after a while, I mean, you can only do that for so many years. And so I think he would just sit me down. We'd be in like a shack out in the jungle, with wires everywhere, cigarettes, drinks, coke, cocaine, people, chewing the coca leaves. And he'd be like, get out of here. And then we would sit down, and he'd give me something. And then he'd be like, find this emerald mine. Here's the map. And I think I had practiced these little games so much from 0 to 10 that it was a game. It wasn't like I was sitting doing a formal remote viewing with, like I would later. I'd be like drugged up and be like, there, that's it, there. And then they might do a second test to validate. Or if there's a couple kids I remember, but it's so vague, that they might have used our comparative data to see. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so
Yeah.
let's go into this role change. You kind of described this part of your life as that TV series Westworld, which a lot of people are familiar with.
Yes.
So let's talk about what happened around that kind of 13, 14, 15-year-old age for a few years after that.
Sure. I do believe before it became truly like a Westworld experience, there was a couple years there where I was fertile. So I became, I started having my period, and they moved me to an above ground base. I do believe it was in Colombia, close to, I believe it's pronounced like Medellin. But it could have been, I always put in there, it might have been a neighboring country. Like, it's just, it's hard to say always for sure, because you're in such a, you don't have any clue where you are, like at least when you're a slave like this, and working in this capacity. But there was a specific time where I was meant to have a child above ground for a different faction. So here's where, for me, a German faction came in, and I've had so many dreams and memories about Germans involved, and the language, and it's interesting. I did a lot of research in the book about how the Germany did influence Colombia a lot, even from World War I. And it became quite a hideout for Hitler, not Colombia specifically, but then all of Latin America became basically a home for the Fourth Reich to continue secretly. And so in whatever case, I was there, I was in a kind of compound run by a German faction, very wild. There are more wild people there because they're in the jungle. I mean, it's not like you would think of. They're more hedonistic, a lot of sex happening, a lot of unbridled behavior. But I was there to be bred, and I did have one child, and this is those memories are so painful that it's like there's like little drops that I've been able to put over a year. But it seems that I had a child, and what happened is that child was sold to extraterrestrials to begin being a part of their civilization, whether it was off world or somewhere else, like being hidden, on our earth. And that this child was used for, because of my genetics, they would be doing the same thing. It would be bred to be like a psychic, whatever, for, but it was very brutal. It was, I remember the emotions of having your child at 2, 3 taken away. And that broke me. I remember after that, I was extremely cold. Like I lost something there, like a part of my humanity. And I think it only happened once, and I'm sure for others it happened for years. I don't know. It's, but soon after that, then I got transferred underground to what I refer to as the West World type of situation. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Was that in the same area, the underground?
I think so. I think in general, there was an amazing expansion of underground bases in the late 1990s and early 2000s in Latin America. And I do believe all the main world governments wanted to be a part of, like it wasn't just this like Fourth Reich doing it. It was like all the major players wanted to get a base underground here or something like that. The evidence I found from that was interesting. Wherever there are bases being built, it's usually around a cement factory. And Gene Decode, I got that info from him a long time ago. And so you look at the cement production of what's happened. I remember in that year, like 1998, 99, it was like quadrupled the amount of like cement production. So that was the only evidence I could find of my claim that there was like an expansion of the underground bases. And the one that I was sent to was like a West world where we weren't robots, but in a kind of way we were, being clones. I say we because there were a lot of hybrids, clones like me, and also just humans, and also extraterrestrials too, used as slaves. And it was a giant underground facility devoted to elites having fun, doing whatever they wanted to do. It was like like you go to a vacation. It was like that. It was like a vacation underworld.
Like a resort almost.
Yes, everything opulent. Everything was about fun, excess, sex, drugs. I don't know that I witnessed horrific. I don't remember anything super dark, like any kind of, I don't remember even occult ceremonies here. It was like pleasure, hedonism. I don't recall anybody being too much underage. So like, you know what I mean? Like really little. I could have stuffed those memories, but most of the slaves like me were around their early teens. And I spent time from there, like roughly from 15 to 18. And I was basically a prostitute. There was a brothel that that I lived at. But by the time I was there, I was already very hardened. And then by the end of it, I really had felt a sense there was more freedom for me. Like I could roam the entire complex, which is like a giant city. And you go to parties, and and I'm just smiling, like not because it's wonderful, but because it just dumbfounds my mind that this exists. And so I remember feeling really in my own, like in my skin. I wasn't afraid. I was very angry. I was very angry at authority, like the woman, the madam that ran ours. Like I hated her guts. Like she was so, demanding, domineering, mean, and so I started to, at this time, I remember like there was this moment I was like just screaming with frustration at being trapped, like at least in Colombia, like at least above ground, like with the paramilitaries, I was useful. I was working, but here I was just a slave. And I remember like some weird pact or something I had promised myself, like I remember saying like, I'm gonna tear this fucking place down to the ground when I get out of here. I remember it. It was like a promise. Like, I'm going to rip it to pieces. I was so angry. And so that's what I endured until about 18.
Oh my goodness. That is hard for people to comprehend, that there's literal kind of civilizations under where
Yes.
we're walking, above ground, that there's
Yeah.
people functioning as if they are
That's
above
right.
ground, but way underground, and that there's really a whole world under there all over the world. And
Yes.
stories like a real testament to that, and that these places, they're not just, like you said, kind of these dark and creepy places. Those exist too, but
Yes.
there are these really elaborate, cozy, comfy, homey places where
Yeah.
people go to escape the world, and they're having
Yeah.
fun. And it's literally like, how I was saying, like a resort almost, but underground.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's everywhere. It's and used for different things, like you said. Some is more like, nefarious, and some is really just for the elites to be able to escape.
100%. Yeah, exactly. And so during this time, you're still going to school, and you have that front life still, while you're then going underground, and you're working at a brothel essentially, and being used as a slave, and still living this day life?
Right.
Oh my
Yeah, and
goodness.
it's in a split consciousness, right? So I do believe at that time it's like there's two of you. So whatever happens to one affects the other. And so absolutely, it really made things difficult for my teen years, for sure.
Oh my goodness. And you've talked about a couple times on here clones too, and kind of consciousness transfer.
Yeah.
That's a really complex and confusing thing too for people to understand.
Yeah.
So do you have any idea how that works, or a way to be able to describe it to people who might just be overwhelmed trying to comprehend what that could mean?
I mean, I like to start with, after all I've seen, even after I got out of the split consciousness program, you have to understand that the technology is so far advanced from what we're told. It's it's they are hundreds and thousands of years ahead of where they're telling us. So how I've heard it described that helped me is that if you like, it's like they learned how to work. I mean, look at it this way. Like, in a dissociative state, my consciousness, because of trauma, was able to split itself away and create a new person, like, in an altered state, which we can talk about later. And so if you see that your consciousness has this ability already, it knows what it needs to do. It can be manipulated. It can morph into another identity to save yourself. Even that is something to think about, that the consciousness is truly a marvelous thing, and it's not a spiritual thing. It's a real thing. And so I believe that for millennia, um, that elites or scientists, or whatever you want to call them, they know how to work with the consciousness, just as if you were working with Play-Doh. They know how to take it out and put it in here, putting it in a clone. And I think there's been some studies done, right, about with cloned animals. I'd have to look it up again. It was many years ago. Having the memory, even if you put an animal's heart in another, it can have memories, or a person puts a heart from another person, and all of a sudden you have memories. I mean, you have to think it's not that wild to think that your consciousness can be kind of split and put into something else. I wouldn't know the technology. I wouldn't even fake to know, because I was out of it, and I just don't remember them talking about it. Or I know there are other testimonies that do, though. And what was the other thing I was going to say? When you look back, there's a quote from some prose speaking about Zeus in my book. It's at the beginning of one of my chapters. And myths often have a ring of truth to them. And there's that famous myth where Zeus splits humans down the middle. They we used to have 4 hands and 4 legs, and he said they're too powerful. So let's split them down the middle, and then they'll forever be kind of weak, searching for the other half, right? And then he allowed these humans to have sex so that they could remember just for a while that they were one, and then split. So that's the myth. But it's basically saying that you're splitting a human, its consciousness, its spirit, everything in two. And so there's a ring of truth. I think they've been doing this for millennia. There's even, when you look at the Matrix, that's even another interesting disclosure, that your consciousness is kind of split in that way. You're being siphoned for your energy in a machine, and your consciousness is still hanging out there, else you wouldn't live. And then it's also being used in a simulated world. That's a big rabbit hole to go down.
It is, but
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me how consciousness is such a big part of the reality that we live in, but it's so stripped away in every aspect of people who live in quote unquote normal society. You go to school, you don't learn about consciousness. It's stripped out of science, it's stripped out of religion. Anywhere that it could possibly have a functionality and a way to be studied, it's completely taken out. And so it's so hard for people to wrap their minds around just our own consciousness and what our bodies are capable of doing, how powerful our mind actually is, how powerful memory is, how you said how memory can be transferred, how information from one person that doesn't know another person can be completely transferred to that other person without them exchanging a single word, that there's a nonverbal communication that's always happening around us, that we're always interacting with. And it's so fascinating that the government, the CIA, these, Nazi programs, these occults, this information is not new. Like you said, it's been around for millennia, but it's been so shielded from society. We've become so separated from who we are that we just think we're these little 2D robots that have to go to work 40 hours a week, go home, go to sleep, and rinse, lather, repeat. And that's all that there is to the world. And so even though this stuff is so hard to hear about, the ways that they have learned about this, that it's come with so much pain. And it's also really beautiful that people like you have come out with the understanding of healing from the trauma of it, and then taking those gifts back and learning how to use your consciousness to elevate the consciousness of other people, how to elevate your own, and how to use these gifts to serve the greater good instead of the dark agendas that they had used you for.
Yes, and it's interesting because the more you have sovereignty over your mind, you don't escape the world. You don't escape. I don't believe that you are escaping and going up to the 5D, as the kind of truther and new age community saying. I think a lot of that is an op, but as you gain sovereignty over your consciousness, you can play the game here, but you can do it from a position where you can play the game, but also be a bit of how do you put, like a manipulator. You can kind of change the rules a little bit. Like, you can bend the rules and enjoy your life here, and not being shackled by these prisons of the mind and the fracturing of the mind. Yeah, it's really exciting work. It doesn't make life easy. I tell my clients that all the time. We're not here. We didn't incarnate to have an easy one here. I think everyone could probably agree to that. This is especially this time, man, what an amazing time to be alive, but very hard in many respects. So, but it gives you tools to surf the waves of this world, and enjoy more of it, and also bring, like you said, others with you, so that you all start vibrating in a much different way. Yeah, it's exciting.
And I'm happy you mentioned that, because we're told, people even who are quote unquote awake, there's kind of a saying out in kind of the truther community that there's a war on our minds, and it's bigger than that. It's not just an information or disinformation war. It's a literal war on consciousness. It's on our soul. It's on creating a vibration that's so low in the world and keeping us there, maintaining that, and then
Yes.
conditioning us to be so mind controlled and thoughtless in a sense of losing
Yes.
our own ability to critical think, that we
Yes.
help bring the reality of the darkness into the
Yeah.
world by participating in it, by believing in it. And so you
Yes.
see how it's so much
Mhm.
bigger than just information. It's literally coming out of this sort of
Yeah.
cocoon that all of us are in, where it's not just
Yes.
information that's being controlled. It's
Mhm.
literally our free thought, it's our critical thinking, and it's our
Yes.
consciousness, it's our soul that they're after. It's not just, feeding us
Yeah.
information and wanting us to believe it.
Absolutely. And I'm sure I'm not the first to say that all the techniques of MK Ultra were implemented not just for individuals, but to be applied on a mass scale.
Yes.
And I'm so sensitive to it now that I can, and I'm sure many of your followers are too. Certain things on the TV or come on, I'm like, oh my God, I got to turn that off. There is military grade subliminal messaging in there that will program you if you keep watching it over many weeks or sometimes it'll get you with one, but you have to understand we are being targeted nonstop to function, to believe things often that are fear-based. And not only that, but in the dreams, which we can talk about later too. The mind control is real. And getting that sovereignty back is an amazing journey, if not the journey of a lifetime. Yeah.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's really incredible, like I said, to hear these horrific stories of growing up and what life was like for you as a child. And then to see you here today so composed and, just in a place of healing that's so powerful that you're able to talk about this so steadily, clinically almost, where you're able to educate us in a way that's empowering. And I
Mm,
know that it's not just, rainbows and butterflies going through this. It's
right.
it's a never-ending journey, the healing. But I
Mhm.
know that it gives so many people hope to see people like you get through those
Yeah.
trenches of what you survived, and then to come out on the other side to be able
Yeah.
to explain this to us and to help us, shine a light on the darkness in the world. And then,
Right.
again, just to think about you doing all of this so young, and I know we're not even done with your story yet. So
I was just thinking that, like, oh my gosh.
I know it's incredible what,
Uh,
just how complex these stories are, and to think how many lifetimes you lived in one life. So
yeah.
your age is kind of that up to 18, and
Mhm.
you are in this sort of playground where you have this dual consciousness that you're living, where part of
Yeah.
you is living this life where you're enslaved and at this brothel, this underground base, and then the other part of you is functioning normally. You're still going to school, you're still doing kind of normal teenager stuff. So let's talk about what happens at age 18, because you were transferred yet again at age
Yes.
18.
Yes, I believe at this time that I was transferred back to America to begin almost like a formal university training, one that you and I would understand better. Um, and to begin a university training for military protocols for remote viewing. So really, strict protocols have nothing to do with, drugs being induced, um, also there's so many different types of protocols for accessing different type of data. So I went underground, and it took me a long time to find out where this was. You might hear my dog. She's having a dream over there. She's crying and like running.
So
um,
cute.
it took me a long time to figure out where it was, but I finally did. I had drawn the memory again. I drew the memory. I was like, there, what is this? And it turned out to be underneath the city of Tehachapi in California. Even as I say it, I'm like, oh boy, I hope it's okay to say that. But um, I mean, it's not a secret because Edwards Air Force Base is right there. It's like 10 miles away. So the likelihood of them having an underground base is very, very real, especially when you drive through there and you see the thousands of windmills there now. And, they're probably powering a huge facility underground, which makes sense for national security. But there was like a university there. It was underground. And different beings were studying all kinds of things, but I was a part of a small faction of hybrids, clones like myself, uh, and also just like there were humans, but it seemed like maybe they had a special bloodline, like they were not just a normal person that had signed up for the Air Force, but they had been kind of destined to do it. And there we began training. So it was just very clinical. It was very cold. I was thrilled to be in a place that I wasn't a slave. I mean, I wasn't being sexually abused. And I was very cold by this point. I remember being almost robotic. I mean, just um, had been so hard. My other peers had sense of humor. They had love relationships. I was just very dead. I was very effective, and I had one good friend there that I remember, and I cry even thinking about her. We became really close, and she was a real soul sister. And we studied there for about 4-ish years, 4 to 5 years. And it was a beautiful campus. It was like not a grid, like a square grid. It was like all these beautiful tunnels and uh, like very organic. There were little restaurants. I wasn't as privileged as some of my other peers. I like had less because I was I don't know if I like considered a slave or a clone. So I had a very strict like budget for myself, but um, we trained. And so it was largely, we were in a room. We had a room we were at almost every day with the huge screens, panels, under all kind of different training you could ever imagine, even having to be in different war scenarios, air movement, spacecraft movement, anything you could think of, they train you to do. So that was about 4 years, and then 4 or 5. And then after that, I became a field op. So then I was, it was like some would stay. It was like I couldn't understand. It's like some of my peers stayed. It's like they never left. They stayed in this room or another room. They got transferred, and you just do your remote viewing or psychic reading from there. You don't have to travel anywhere. But for some reason, for me, I have memories of traveling to places or different bases, and then my most amazing memory, which has plagued me my whole life, actually. I had no idea. I thought it was a dream my whole life, was visiting an underground base. There's pictures in my book. The most amazing base in the mountains. And I still am looking for the location. I can't be sure. I don't know if it's Latin America or Eastern Europe. But going into this, and it was clearly extraterrestrial, like run by a different race. It was underground, but kind of like you go through a cave system to get there. And then going through this and then approaching what I didn't understand for many years. I just didn't know. I went in, and it was like I was communicating with this ball of energy in this strange grotto. It was like hidden way deep in the mountains. And I only understood only place I could understand what it most likely was after reading Michael Sala's book. I think it was Army. I think it was number 3 with JP. When he described something to do with the Ark, which is, a spacecraft run by ancient consciousness. And that, when I read that, I remember us bawling, like, oh my God, that's it. They brought me there to speak to this Ark. And that was my most incredible memory from that time, towards the very end of my service to the Air Force, when I was maybe 28, 29.
That's interesting about hearing testimony from survivors of whether it's secret space program, purely MK Ultra, any type of government program. There seems to have been a deliberate divide in disclosure between MK Ultra / child trafficking, child experiment abuse, and then on the other side, you have an entire disclosure movement for aliens, UAPs, UFOs. And it seems to
Yes.
be this deliberate divide where what I found, and I'm sure you have too, and
Yeah.
your testimony is testament to this, is that it seems like we run in these endless hamster wheels because we're so focused on just this one aspect
Yeah.
of this, and the communities don't come together and share information. To me, it seems like this all goes together, that aliens, UFOs, advanced technology. Of course, the government, like you said, has
Right.
technology that is way beyond where we're at right now. Of
Right.
course, some of it's going to be confusing to figure out. So who would be
Yes.
best to try to interface with it? Well,
Right.
amnestics seem like that would be a really good idea if you train and condition and torture children who have
Yes.
psychic abilities to try to
Mhm.
figure out things that these, psychopathic adults can't literally empathically
Right.
do. And then the
Right.
children don't even remember doing it. And then later on in life, whenever they come to share about it, it's going to be something that's going to be so unbelievable for people just because it's so futuristic. But I think
Right.
that's really interesting that your story also encompasses these different elements, that it wasn't just that you're
Yeah.
just in this lab, or taken to these bases, being tortured and experimented on, that there
Yeah.
was purposes. They would do that and then have a purpose and a job for you to do with the things that
Yes.
they're conditioning you for, including interfacing and communing with technology that it sounds like they didn't know how to
Right.
interface with. So they
Yeah.
thought, let's see if Veronica's gifts can
Yeah.
potentially break that barrier and create a communication between something that none of us can.
Yes. Yes. I look back and wonder on the nature of how we even were allowed to go in there. I look at all these things and I'm trying to prove
Yeah.
it, with evidence, and why would they let the Air Force, and it's exactly probably as you say, there's probably some inner working between civilizations underground and factions above ground that are trying to, figure things out, work together. Um, and it was strange. The one memory I had after I was done, I remember looking at my superior that was there because I passed out at some point and I woke up on like a cot. But I remember feeling really sad that I had done it. Like that I can't figure out. My superior was grinning ear to ear and he was I don't know. He wasn't the nicest man. And I was like, "Oh no, what have I done?" So I was also wondering like what I still have to dig for those memories of what happened there. Um, and one thing as you're speaking, I was thinking of is I really do think the intelligence agencies are watching all of this and they're watching everything you and I ever do, anybody who's coming forward. Some get pushed to the front a lot of 9 times out of 10, 9 times, not always. It's some, well, that gets into a different subject, but a lot of times they're disinfo. There can be assets that know that they're assets or they don't, like myself, that are pushed to the limelight. However, they also let people who have a true story come through and have a big impact. And I believe the reason why is it's also giving information to all of these different agencies that are wondering what the hell was going on. They don't know the secret programs that are functioning and what they did. So yeah, piggybacking off of what you said. And the other thing I wanted to mention too is as you were speaking, it's interesting. My dad, I remember I couldn't figure out, there are times I remember him looking at me and throwing me a ball or, and he would look in my eyes with, I could never figure out what he was sending me. I was like, why is he looking at me that way? And it was a reverence. It was like he was so proud of me. And, and for what? I mean, I was like, okay, he loves me, maybe, and there's also other darker elements. He could have been, some strange love, uh, feeling he was throwing, but it was like, and then there were comments later in my life that just didn't make sense. And now looking back, I see that there was a bit of pride that I was in this institution, that it was hard and it was brutal, and he was probably racked with all kinds of strange guilt and everything, but that there was a part of him that was proud of what I was doing. So, it's very complicated.
Yeah, well, I mean, you hear through these testimonies how many children don't make it out and don't even
Right.
survive this.
Right.
And so I think the risk that parents take putting their children in, especially if they have narcissistic, psychopathic
Yes.
tendencies and are,
Yes.
literally handing their children over to be abused, there
Yeah.
probably is this kind of relief in a way that, okay, I did it and my child's
Right.
succeeding,
And she's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, she's succeeding, she's being
Yeah.
useful, she's,
Yeah.
she's helping the agencies and organizations,
Yeah.
and it really is insane and unbelievable just the limits that they push children, young adults to their human potential and see
Mm.
the capabilities of what's
Yeah.
possible
Yeah.
before that sort of, they try to see how far they can push you
You're
before you
right.
can't go anymore.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, how many children don't make it through and how certain children just have these higher capabilities of tolerating it and pushing
Yeah.
through and being
Yeah.
able to push that boundary further and further and further. Do you
Right.
have other memories of like communing or being used with advanced technology or extraterrestrials in your time? And do you know what were they trying to have you communicate, or did they have a purpose they told you that they were trying, like an end result that they wanted?
With that specific, that was the clearest. I have some other blips of memory. However, the others that are kind of more that have some aspect of technology, they do seem to be off world. But I didn't go down that rabbit hole because the memories were so few, and um I do feel from about 22 to 30. I believe it's in my book that I do feel there. I don't know what to describe it other than something like the white hats or some benevolent faction somehow came in and started communicating with me. I'm not I remember having this memory of like I was remote viewing and there was a voice that came in and I was like looking at my iPad or whatever something like an iPad, and I was like the voice was like, don't tell them about that part. Only tell them about this. And so it was like somebody was starting to kind of guide me with my remote viewing information, to help me have a benevolent effect somehow. And so that's the only kind of different memory. There was a couple off world that are very vivid, but I just don't have enough yet. And as far as technology, um, that was the main one. That really was the main was working with this kind of arc-like consciousness.
Yeah.
But I can imagine if I have time, I'll dig further into those memories. It's been a wild ride since I published the book, but I know there's more in there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so interesting to me how these disclosure movements get so isolated and
Mm.
compartmentalized when
Yeah.
if you actually listen to a lot of, say, UFO abductee experiencer, people
Yeah.
who have psionically communed with craft or advanced technology, people who have interfaced with aliens or believe that they continue to. A lot
Yeah.
of them disclose in their testimony, it's not a big part of their story, but they were abused as children and that they have memory of some level of being sexually abused. And then
Yeah.
you listen to sexual abuse, MK Ultra,
Yeah.
organized abuse, mind control survivors, and many of them have at least one memory of
Yeah.
seeing or interfacing with some absolutely insane advanced technology that the
Yeah.
public is privy to, and or
Yeah.
seeing entities that aren't human. And so it's just so
Yes.
amazing to me that people haven't sort of listened to both and put it together and been like, wait a minute, the psyop is
Yeah.
that everything's divided. We need to put all this
Yes.
together, and we'll probably come to the conclusion that the government is doing all of this, that all of this is
Yes.
right here in front of us. Sure, there might be off planet stuff and different, we might be going to other planets and
Mhm.
other planets might be coming here. But to
Mhm.
think the government just doesn't know, that they're like, oh, we don't know. It's coming from another planet. We have no idea where this
Right.
craft came from. And it's a mystery to us. Or
Yeah.
aliens or beings that aren't human. We have no idea what's going on. Of
Yes.
course they do. They just try
Yeah.
to get us to look up in the sky instead of at them, but these testimonies really bring us back
Yeah.
down to earth. And it's like, wait a minute, the culprit here is the
Mhm.
government. It's not the sky. It's not
Yeah.
some weird of course it's a strange phenomena to people
Right.
who have never experienced it, but
Yeah.
it's a government operation. It's all here. We have advanced technology and hybrid creatures right here on this planet with us.
Yes. Yeah, and it's hard right now because the term, what really has been disheartening is that the term secret space program has gotten infiltrated by the intelligence agencies are having a field day. There's a lot of disinfo.
Yes.
But it was such a prolific, those early accounts from survivors, but I think it needs to morph into, I was calling them earth-based programs for a while, because like you said, it's all intertwined, and the earth-based programs are working with the secret space program. Like there's not as much division as we think.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's I'm hoping, it's hard, I'm hoping that the secret space community too can kind of save itself, because right now it looks a little bleak. Like a lot of people coming with stories that I don't know if they're not true, but there you can tell, they're having worked with intelligence agencies, you can just tell there's something not right about it. It's too sensational, and it's not giving real info with evidence, any kind of evidence. When you're listening to somebody's secret space testimonial. And the good ones, the ones that have some element of truth, always have like a little evidence. They search for it. They want humanity to have a grasp of this. And I do too. But yeah, and actually, and there is one more fantastical memory. As we're speaking now, it came up. Maybe we could, I don't know. There was a portal technology, something I remember. The
Like a
problem is I
Stargate
don't know.
thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It was, I remember waiting in a lot. Now, I don't know if this was during my split consciousness program. Like, I don't know, or if it was on this life, at this normal timeline as an asset for the intelligence agency. So that's why I never bring it up. But that technology was amazing. Um, the quietness, I remember nobody was around. It was like I was in this room. It was closed off. I was totally alone for a good hour. It was like, I don't know if there was timing involved, or I remember being really bored sitting in this white room. It felt like an airport waiting room. And then I remember this look, of like looking back before kind of dipping in. So, but that brings me down a really big rabbit hole. And I can't, at the moment, I'm not looking at it, because then I'm thinking, oh my God, time travel. And no, I'm not even going to touch it right now. Maybe like in a year, I'll try to see it.
It's a lot. Yeah. And then there's the other element of, I always say there's no such thing as a false memory. It's trying to figure out the context of it, especially
Yes,
because these adults are looking at a lot of these recalled memories from their child's eye, whether they were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth.
yes,
You
yes.
hear stories that, like you said, can sort of muddy the waters if the person doesn't have context. For example, I interviewed a survivor who had said, before I had my full memory, a memory that I did have was that I was abused by Minnie Mouse. And I was telling people about that, and everybody thought I was insane. She's like, including myself. I thought I was crazy too,
Wow.
telling my therapist I was being, abused and raped by Minnie Mouse. And she's like, then the full memory came. I realized it was a family member dressed as Minnie Mouse. Whereas a
Wow.
child being under
Right.
drugs and being
Oh,
traumatized, being in that moment,
oh,
being sexually abused,
wow.
the child thought
Yeah.
it was real, right? So these
Yeah.
memories, they're all real no matter the context. It's just figuring out, was it an AI simulation of that
This
advanced technology was being used on the child, and they're seeing these
right.
incredible things in front of them? Was it a play being set up, kind of how you were mentioning with rituals, that all these adults
Yes.
literally get together and there's already a kind of a stage set up where they know exactly what they're going to do, and
Yes.
they have their wardrobe, they have kind of their costume on, and then they perform a scripted ritual? Or is
Yeah.
it an adult dressed up as, say, an alien or a princess or whatever,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So it's all about
Yes.
context, and that, I think, is the hardest part, because when you first remember something like that, you can gaslight yourself and be like, there's no way I was time traveling. There's no way that I
Exactly.
was doing this. I think, for one, time travel is real. We just don't know exactly how it works, so it's confusing to talk about. But also,
Yeah.
there's so many ways now that they could potentially create a scenario where a
Yeah.
child thinks that they're going in time
True.
traveling.
True.
You know,
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
all of it, like it's all a real memory. It's just figuring out what exactly the context was, you know?
Yes, yes, I agree. Yeah, and it comes over time. Yeah, it takes to your conscious mind time to accept the construct.
Yes. But
Yeah.
things like stargates, of course, and time travel, that's
Mhm,
so consistent with these testimonies. And I know it can be
mhm.
just overwhelming to try to go down that and be like, what in the
Yes.
heck did I experience, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
In your testimony, it really does, like, it goes through so many different layers of this programming, from the lab settings to the underground to the military to kind of like you said, the fantastical of these really larger than life concepts that even physics doesn't fully understand yet, you know?
Right. Right. Yes.
And so let's talk about past that. So we at the beginning we started at age 33. So we kind of ended these memories at age 30, about whenever this kind of
Right.
last experience kind of ended. And then it seems like you maybe had a few years that were not maybe eventless, but that weren't really quite as involved with what you had been through for so long. And then you ended up remembering at age 33. So I don't know if there's anything you want to fill in between remembering and then age
Yeah.
30, or if you want to maybe continue on after that. I'll let you pick up your story where you think it should be.
Well, I think the thing only to mention is that during the ages of 10 to 20, it was I was living my normal life here, which was also I when I was writing the book, I just mentioned, that it was difficult. I mentioned this, the kind of the roots of it. Of course, as a teenager, it's very common. You start to act out. You're looking for ways to cope through drugs, through sex, through dangerous situations, which definitely around 14, especially 14 to 18, I was very, very talented. I was working. I was, I was, getting through school, but also angry and coping in a lot of unhealthy ways. Um, and then from 18 to 28, I was, it was still strange. It was a mess. Um, but the in my book, I didn't quite understand that I was also being used by occult societies and the intelligence agencies from 10 onwards as well. So the book, I didn't have the memories of that realization. I thought, yeah, I just had a hard life. I had a hard life. Here was a partner, there was a partner. I moved here, I did this school, and bam, at 28, I started to have psychic rememberings, and at 33, I remembered everything. That's in the book, but um, in reality, from 10 on, I was still being used by the intelligence agencies in this timeline at the same time as I was doing some split consciousness program. And this got blown wide open once I met Michael, the SSP whistleblower, um, and I'm using a false name, but this is what my next transfer. I thought I was done. I published the book and I was like, okay, now I'm just gonna speak. I'm gonna go help people. I'm gonna remember. I'm gonna build my, and continue healing, continue expanding in consciousness, psychic work. But then this realization happened that I was very much an asset all those years up into that current time. So that's the only thing to say about it. I mean, in my book I go into more detail about, and I think people really appreciate it. I'm very honest about what I was like, what I did, and I'd say it without shame, you know.
And this here is Veronika's book that I have up on screen, Out of Sight. It's on Amazon. I'm going to have that below. Out of Sight, a true story of a psychic agent and remote viewer for secret government programs. And of course, Veronika's talking about her testimony today, but like she said, there's a lot more detail in her book. And if you guys want to get the full scope of testimony of things that you're not hearing on this interview too, and to support survivors and to help them continue to be able to do their work, please go support her work and go click the link, get it as a gift. Holidays are coming up. If you guys celebrate, it makes a great gift for your friends and for you to add to your library. You guys have a lot to learn from people like Veronika who are making learning so affordable for us to get our hands on. So please go support her book.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I'm working on a three-part series as well, um, on my Patreon, that will be available to free members as well. And I'm doing that just to make sure, if anything happens to me, that the testimony's out there so that it can reach people as well. Because it helps. I awakened because of other people's testimonies. And the three-part series here is more about what I recently found out about being an asset for the CIA. And really, the more split consciousness program is really detailed in my book. Yeah, and I do interviews, and we have, I'll be talking more about dream expansion courses based on information from intelligence agencies. And it's been a really exciting time. We've done a lot of experiments such as dream telepathy, where we're able to influence each other's dreams.
Wow.
It's a very real phenomena. So, and I love my Patreon. I love it's a family. We're all very close and remembering together. A lot of them are remembering their own stories as well.
And I love that people are like you are using Patreon to grow community. It's hard to do that on platforms that censor like YouTube and
Yes.
some of these other
Yes.
social media platforms that are really against this material. I
Yes.
love the creativity that you and others are finding with Patreon, with their flexibility with having free speech. She does
Yes.
her membership is for free. You guys can see all the videos for free, most of them. And
Mhm.
then she has different membership tiers if you guys want to join some of these more personalized community events that Veronika puts on with certain members who want to participate. And you guys can help support her work that way while also becoming closer to the community, getting personal time with her and with other members of the
Yes.
community. It's really neat. I love that you've done this and that you've added your videos here for us to watch for free. She has
Mhm.
an interview that she did herself. So it's kind of her own testimony on here. She has a little snippet of it on YouTube. But of course, like I was just saying, YouTube is really hard to keep this type of information on. So she sort of uses her YouTube for little teasers. And then you guys can
Mhm.
find the full scope of the videos right here on Patreon, which is awesome. So I'd love if you guys went and supported her as well. And I'm going to have that in the show notes too.
Yes, thank you. And it's a lovely community. It's hard to find your community, especially, it's a small niche, but it's so they're so amazing, full of very spiritual people, wise people that have been on this journey for decades, of consciousness expansion. And I'll be doing more community events. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm going to start doing for my consciousness expansion tier. I'm going to start doing either weekly or monthly gatherings, where we can expand together, do targeted meditations, and help each other. Especially in this time, we really need community in this time moving
We do,
forward.
yes. And special places like your community where we can kind of go and not risk, everybody on social media seeing it in, a public
Yeah,
forum
right.
or public chats and stuff like that. So it's wonderful that you're doing this and offering it. And I'm sure people have found so much value and like comfort in having the
I
safe
hope
space that
so.
they can go meet other like-minded people and then of course learn from you and these wonderful people that you're interviewing too and bringing on to help share their own knowledge with your audience.
Yes, yes. And I celebrate, that interview is with one of my colleagues. He's in our dream experiment group. A wonderful soul. So yeah, I'm honored. It's my lifeline too. I Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your life sort of coming out of these memories and what that looked like for you. You talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but let's sort of talk about life on the other side of that and falling in love. And you have a really incredible part of your testimony sharing how even disclosure is very infiltrated and how you became a target of that. You sort of moved out of one abuse cycle and they pushed you into a whole nother one, which seemed very innocent. You were finally remembering and getting
Yeah.
into networking with like-minded people. And there was just a whole nother different type of targeting that you encountered. So let's get into that part of your story.
Oh yeah, and where to begin? I mean, I think so after I was technically back from my split consciousness program, and um, once I was 30 years old, I mean, I was living, it was still a very adventurous life, but I was really, trying to live an upstanding, virtuous life. I, got a master's um, at Indiana Bloomington University in opera. I was really on the more of a fast track to have an opera career. I worked like a dog, good grades, doing everything you're supposed to. I ended up traveling a lot through Europe. I met my daughter's father, and we were pursuing opera together at that time. And I was leading trying to lead a good life. I know that in general, because of the trauma that was not recognized over all those years, that it made me, I wasn't always balanced. I had a lot of emotional um, issues that you don't understand when it's just festering, and it comes out when it's triggered by things you don't understand. But everything crashed at after the car crash. Everything dismantled. Um, when the memories started flooding in of abuse, I mean, you transform as a person. You're not the same person anymore. And it was, very hard on my relationship at that time. And once looking back, so I would come to find this out much later after going through the Sedona op. But looking back, now I understand that there wasn't one point of my life that I was not being manipulated by an intelligence agency. It might have been a little less, or they might have had me sleeping, kind of like, okay, let's just put her over there for a while. But they had control of me and my dissociative alter. That's kind of, I call her my military alter, and I call her Sloan. They had created that since it could have been as young as 4 or 5, or they might have specifically got her to fracture around 10 years old. But they had control over her all that time. I mean, all the way up. And I didn't know all of this was dissociative. I had a few memories of my life thinking, wait, what did I do that? Like that, like I would have a blip of memory come through, like it would bleed through of me doing something, but it was very strange. I didn't have any context. I thought and then I would just brush it off and keep living my life. But they, from 10 to 18, I was being used for, at that time, groomed for uh, intelligence gathering. So sorry if I'm not as eloquent. These are new memories, so I haven't had a lot of time to sit with them.
You're doing great.
Thank you. And so from 10 to 18 was largely like learning how to be kind of, a honeypot, in a way of being able to satisfy men and women, how to get data, nothing too dangerous. It was all, and this I think was largely around the Spokane area. Especially when I was, staying with my father during my visitations with him, that kind of thing. Then from 18 on, I was manipulated to be with partners, to get married, to travel here, to go to this university, to do this, to that. My whole life was not my own choice. It felt like it, but I was just being influenced to go so that I could be used as a dissociative asset for different things, which we can get into later. So I didn't know any of this. So 18 to 28, I was still highly being used on university campuses. But when I got in the car crash, I was living in Bulgaria, still trying to have a singing career in opera, and the memories came back, and the conscious memory recall when it came, and I started thinking, oh my gosh, I don't understand where these memories are. And then I contacted Michael at SSP Whistleblower. And as I mentioned, I became his remote viewer, and we fell in love, and we moved to Sedona. And it was fast. You have to understand, it was fast, alarming. I mean, really, looking back, we both realized that we the love is real, and there's probably some kind of contract we wrote before coming in this life to end up doing what we did together, which was expose a very dark operation. However, we know we were probably both influenced. It's called a love bite. And so we fell very hard and very fast. And we were in the middle of Sedona, and still I had written my book, or I was writing it. I had come to terms that I'd been in some kind of split consciousness program, which was very hard for me to figure out, swallow, go through all the emotional. Then in February, I think this year, so February of 2025, seems like a year, like a lifetime has been since then. I got a call from him, and I was out of town, and the call was, he was very upset, and he was like, I know what you've been doing. And he was like, and I'll explain why, but he's like, you've been having an affair with our friend, and I'm going to call him Darian. His name, it's not his real name. And he went in to explain to me what happened. And I broke down, of course, and said, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no memory. Something must be wrong. He must have been lying to you. He must have been trying to hurt you somehow. Let's figure this out. So lucky for me, he loved me so much, that he was like, let's try and figure this out. Because he was very wounded, rightly so, because of the way that Darian manipulated this whole thing. So what we came to find out over many months of looking at the data that was already there, aside from my memories. So the memories are coming; those are very, very. They're so new that the subconscious mind doesn't have. Like, I've had decades to build a relationship with my subconscious over those memories of, that really the past abuse. But this was so new that it's very hard. So I do have some, which I can mention later. We found out that from the very beginning, I had been activated to fall in love with Michael, have him fall in love with me, have us move really fast, move in together. And in a classic honeypot situation, and then do something like end up dismantling his confidence, hurting him, destroying nothing bad. Like, it wasn't about eliminating him. This is how they do it. And so, we can get into how the agencies work. They are psychological masters. They know how to break people without poison or anything. So that was the original. So I, of course, didn't remember any of this looking back. It's all very true. But the issue was that never had I been activated to fall in love, and never had I been activated to destroy someone I love. So I may have been activated to, get information from whatever, like when I was in Romania or traveling through Hungary, to get some information from some elite guy, and, and it might have kind of hurt him, but never was I made to fall in love and then destroy. And this, to me, eventually broke me, because the love was so strong. And I can kind of explain how it went down. It's the first time I've ever spoken about it here with you. So the emotions are thick. But essentially, Darian is a spiritual figure in Sedona. And he's kind of like a subcontractor for the intelligence agencies that was basically my handler. And he invited us to his conference. In the very beginning, it was our first conference together we went to. We're so in love. And he activated me there. And we know the words he used. We know the smells that he used. We know the gestures he used to specifically activate me, which don't work on me anymore, or are very, very, I've been working on deprogramming all of this. And he activated me there, and from there on out would influence me to do whatever I needed to get Michael to Sedona, to get under the grid, because you do have to be near a person, have them near you so that you can influence them. You can use technology and all that. So that's the basis of what's happening in the end. And I can get into it. Another altar that I created at 14, and her name's Christine. She ended up helping me find my liberty from all of this, and actually really enraging my handler and just kind of destroying. I did things so that the operation would get messy, and then Michael he has the intelligence to be able to see all the patterns and all the details, so that our combination ended up saving our lives, because it did get dangerous at the end. And that's where we are here. And I can go into depth. It's an amazing story.
Yeah, if you want to, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just want to say too, thank you for sharing that. I know it can be really overwhelming sharing such personal information publicly, and I don't take it lightly that you chose here to share something for the first time. And it's horrific and horrible how they continually stalk, harass, and target the same children that already went through hell, that they don't try to just let you live some normal life. Like, people, I think, have the perception that, oh, well, your child abuse ended, so you're good. Like, you're fine. Just get up and go to work, and like, who cares, you know? And it's like, no, it doesn't stop. It evolves. They invested. I mean, we just heard how much time, money, and energy that they invested into you, how many people were involved, the places that you were taken to. This wasn't just a small operation, and you were one of however many children have gone through this. You know, they don't just want you to just be gone. When you veer off, they're going to try everything they can to get you back in, including orchestrating relationships and people that organically come into your life that you think are there out of their own volition, who genuinely care and who, you know, are there for you, when in fact, associated or not, or witting or unwitting, you know, a lot of times you and others find out these people were sent. It was an orchestrated strategy to help loop you back in, to create a way for you to trauma bond back with somebody, back into the cult, you know, back into the network. And so I'm so heartbroken that happened to you. And also, like how I was saying in the beginning, I'm so thrilled that you were able to put these pieces together and break through. This is one of the first relationships I've heard spoken where both partners broke through the veil and still came together, and we're like, screw these people. We're going to come together now after them, you know, and continue our love, and that we're going to make this a real love. And I'm so happy for you that you found that. And so just disgusted that there's people that acted like they cared about you, who just, you know, swooped in and tried to destroy that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing operation. It's a well-oiled machine there in Sedona. So people flock there for spiritual activation. Now, the earth energies there are transformative, but the earth energies can be harnessed by good or evil. It's just an energy. And the entire Sedona area and the VOC, the Oak Creek, village of Oak Creek below it, is under a grid of influence. And it's a well-oiled operation to bring well-known whistleblowers or researchers in disclosure and bring them there. And it's the same. It's happened to a lot. And I'm not going to say names, but they bring some kind of honeypot, like myself, whether it's a man or a woman, and they influence that person to eventually do something that dismantles the whistleblower. It's different. They pick different scenarios based on your psychology. And it's interesting. Yeah, I feel like at the time that I was activated to fall in love with Michael in Bulgaria, I was way up in the mountains. I was running from something with my current partner. Then I was like, I need to get out. We were up in the mountains with nobody in the middle of this wild area with, just like hunters around. And I think that was my subconscious trying to escape, because I was being used. I don't ever think it stopped. I think that it was constantly, they were activating me to do different, either participate in occult rituals around the world, and also be kind of a double, like an eye of like seeing who's there. So it was like kind of a double agent thing, and also being kind of a honeypot situation. And I have memories now to confirm that and different. But by the time this happened, I remember, because I remember two guys coming up there pretending to work on the electricity. And I remember twice, and I remember yelling at them in Bulgarian, and my dog was going crazy. And probably what happened at that point is they probably said a few trigger words to put me into my altered state as Sloan, and said, this is your next assignment. You're going to be doing this, 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 and this. And then they put you back in, and you as your core self subconsciously have the seeds planted. You're going to go research. Oh, wow. And you think it's all, spontaneous and what a coincidence, but every moment is planned. And the thing that's interesting is our story is that it's just interesting. We're both very stubborn, and the love, there's something there, like we contracted to come in. Or I've told him that I think I knew there was that I was desperate to get out. I was so desperate to get out of service, and that I knew somehow that like he was the one to help me break this whole paradigm and find my freedom. But yeah, it's a juicy story. It's and I'm writing on a book about it, slowly but surely. But do you want me to go into the details of
I
of
do,
how it
yeah.
works?
I want
Okay.
to just comment though, real quick. I
Yeah.
think that it's absolutely terrifying also to think of what you just said. And I hope people caught that, where you were saying there are conventions, conferences, events set up that advertise and want whistleblowers, survivors, very vulnerable people who have been through some really hard things to
Oh
show
yeah.
up together. And they are using it as an opportunity. It's almost like, you look at, say, a priest who does a sermon, and then behind the scenes, he is abusing kids. You have people who are set up as authorities in these
Yep.
conferences who, oh my gosh, I can't wait to go see them speak. Of course I'm going to go. This is an amazing headliner. Right. And these vulnerable people are going, hoping to finally have their voice heard, and to find community. And they're basically entering a danger zone where the people running this are wanting to activate the people going that are looking for information about their life. And I think it's absolutely horrifying, because there's so few places that people feel safe. And like, that's one of them. And like, we have to be aware of that in our community, that you can't even be safe going to one of these things with, if you're not aware of your triggers, and if you haven't kind of broken that. And you're not the first person I've heard talk about that either.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's like a lot of these journalists and stuff. Oh, were you in Gifted and Talented? Come tell us. Were you in Experience?
Please come tell us all your secrets.
And to me, it's like, and then you see people just so eager to tell their story that they do it. And it's like, you don't know what that person is capable of doing if they're involved with these programs and are just looking for information, like you said, to collect as intel or to retrigger you to come back.
Reactivate.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. And it goes both ways. I had a good friend. She said, when I was telling her my story, when we were first coming together, she was like, oh yeah. She's like, basically all these conferences are to figure out who's an operator, a handler, and who's an asset. She's like, these are all designed around handlers coming and activating their assets. And so you have to be very careful when you go. You could be an asset and not even know it, or have, like you said, trigger words for any. It's really, it can be very dangerous. It's wonderful though, if you're prepared and you can go and you can enjoy the good parts of it. But for people like me, it's very dangerous. And the conferences I did go to that whole year of 20 2024 and 2025, I was being activated. So not just with this guy, Darian. We call him Ding Dong here. We give him kind of a silly name so that we take away his power. So sometimes I want to call him Ding Dong, but not just him, but it was other the other whistleblowers in the community that are actually well respected. Also, I went back and I realized they triggered me, that they're also working for intelligence agencies. So, very famous. And so they are everywhere, and a lot of them do it. They become handlers because they get power. They get their careers kind of pushed forward, and they get power. The thrill of activating an asset and having control over someone, like it's very addictive. So the handlers go to these conferences and are told, by higher ups, these are her triggers. This is what we want you to do. And they do it. And it's very dangerous. And that happened. And also some random people would come up. So people pretending to be a conference goer, just like a nice guy. And then all of a sudden walking up with gear, for the music or whatever. And all of a sudden he says, "My name is Andrew 7654339, blah, blah, blah." And then, I was activated. And then a day later, had missing time at night, and I have some flashes of memory of being debriefed and reprogrammed for my next steps. So it's real, and it's real, and I'm not the only asset. There are tons of assets like me that have a dissociative state that don't remember being activated. It's an amazing and horrifying phenomenon. But Darian was essential for the whole operation. I mean, the others might have been too, but he was a real special part of the whole thing, a real driver of the whole operation. And so once he activated me also in general, it was targeted for me, but also at the same time, he would say all the triggers, and to see who in the audience was an asset. So then after he'd say the trigger words, he'd say, "Oh, everybody come up and dance." And those who had been activated would know, because there's a programming about dancing for some assets, I believe. And you would go up, and I was one of them. Like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go dance now." And I remember my partner, Michael, looking at me like, "What is wrong? What are you doing?" Like I was very out of character. I had already been activated. During that whole time, it gets a little bit more, I'll say, fantastical, because I do know now that he was also active in the dream space. So he was what we kind of refer to as a dream agent, to where he was a prolific lucid dreamer that most likely was hired by intelligence agencies and used as an asset to influence other people's dreams. So you can be influenced in your dream. And a lot of my Instagram and TikTok, a lot of that, I'm posting that. I'm looking at all the science and all the different aspects and my own experiments that prove it's true. I can target someone in my sleep and influence them just by telepathy. But you can do it with technology. You can do it through the phone, can be perturbing frequencies by your head. But you also, when you're advanced enough, can actually visit someone's dream space, just like in Inception, and kind of have like a shared dream space with the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. This is a real technology, and he was using my dream space as also a way to come in and give me orders. And I had a literal dream. And back then I didn't understand. I was like, "Oh, I had a dream about Ding Dong, about Darian. He was giving me orders. He was in like a big chair and black, and it was like underground. And I wrote it down. And at the time, Michael and I were like, whatever, we didn't understand what was going on. He was doing that regularly. By the time we moved to Sedona, I mean, it was all set up. We got moved to a house that was between two military grade, I'm forgetting the term of the technology, but two military grade radio towers that basically have, and between two, and we found, uh, we got footage of it and everything. It was destroyed magically, but we were being influenced by radio frequency waves so that it could make us sick in the house. Our house was bugged. We've actually made a video of it. We once we started to learn, once the I guess the shit hit the fan, we started to really explore what we were in. What is this operation? So we moved to this house, and everything was moving ahead. And of course, Darian was our, inviting us to everything, became coming bosom buddies with Michael. Of course, in order to influence someone's dreams, it's very effective if you know them, if you are friends with them. And it's a tactic anyway. He was my handler. He wanted to be close to us. And, but in the midst of that became even more, for me, evidence that all this happened, because there were times I must have had to meet him, right? And it was underground where this was happening in my memory. I could have been meeting him anywhere on hiking trails. Anywhere where he could have literally could have picked up the phone, called me, and said, "Agent, blah, blah, blah," and put me in a dissociative state and say, "Meet me at this trail." Now, what's difficult about this is that it's hard. It's like I haven't figured out. It's hard for me to speak of it in a really eloquent way. But during this, he not only was he my handler, but he was also taking advantage of me sexually. So there was something very dark, and not only him, but his associates. So he had, now in my dissociative state, I don't know what I'm like. I'm sure it's not, it's interesting. It's almost as if we started like a relationship. There was something there, and I'll explain why later, why I thought that. And also Michael was convinced. He was like, "No, I know from his comments that he made that there was something going on between you two that was deeper." And so not only was he taking me out and maybe taking advantage of me in this state, but also there was like a underground base right there. And the entrance, it's hard. It's like I've never said these things publicly. I'm wondering tomorrow, what stuff will be coming up. But the entrance was literally a 5-minute walk from our house. And I found that out later. What had happened was that they had programmed me to not go into this little tiny, I'd say a half-mile square area. I walked my dog religiously. I went everywhere, but for some reason, I wouldn't go in there. There was like a little neighborhood, and it was strange. I would even sit right outside where they put up like some grid or something, and I'd always look in there. I was like, what? I was like, I wonder what's in there. The one time that I did go in there, two hustlers, like two bodyguards, came out, and they knew that I wasn't supposed to cross a certain area, and they came up, and they drove up in this blacked out car. And by this point I was already on alert. We were under alert, and so I was pretty I wouldn't get afraid, but they cornered me in a very private area, and it was very threatening and scary. And they came up right to the car, and I was lucky. I had I never walk without pepper spray and a knife, and I had my big dog anyway. And I told myself to be brave, and I walked right past them the only way out, and I glared at their eyeballs to make sure I could get an identity. And I did get a video of the car. And I came back and I was really upset, and I was like, why is this happening? Why am I being... And I thought it was because of my book, which It could have been, but now I see. When later we figured everything out, we were starting to figure everything out, I said, let's go walk. Let's go up to where I think the entrance is to some base, to this area. Well, we come to find out that Darian has a house there that he has put under his parents' name. And it's obviously a house it's been given to them probably by an intelligence agency, because he pretends to live up in Sedona and doesn't have enough money to buy a house and all this stuff. It's all lies. So we find out and we walk to the house, and those same two agents follow us the whole time. The whole time they're watching us, following us. And for me, it was validation that I wasn't supposed to be there and that I had been there. And then I'm working on memories, dropping in on the reality of that base. So that was like really very, very validating. The only other thing that was extremely validating to me was, a couple very strange nights with him. And Darian, it's hard for me to describe because I'm me, my core self. Like, we went out to a club with him and his girl and a couple other people, but something had happened because he was treating me very strange and looking at me very strange, and I couldn't. And one of my alters peeked out at that time, and we haven't talked about alters and how they work, but it's an amazing phenomenon. And she peeked out, and it was Christine. And I remember that moment with him, and she wanted to kill him. Like, she's very angry. She's a rebellious teen, that saved me many times from difficult situations, but she's very destructive too. And he, right after that moment, he came over to me, found me, and tried to trigger me. He put his hand on my arm, and he said like some things, and his girl was watching me too. And then, then I changed. I went back into this front self. So I remember that too. That was a very, very validating moment that he knew what he was doing with me. But I don't know where to go from there. Basically something, I really made him mad. I have a memory. Something happened where I like snitched on him, or I mucked up something for him, and it ruined the op. And everything started to spiral so much that even he started to spiral, and he slipped, and he made this comment to Michael. And that was that comment that Michael was like, put everything together. He was like, oh. I was like, you. And at first, Michael just thought we were having an affair because he didn't know I was an asset. And then we realized that it had been created from the beginning, this whole entire thing. It got so bad to where Darian put the stakes up, and there was a moment where the order was to then poison all our water. And this, I think, has been said on, I think Michael has shared this. And what broke me was also that it was the same water I was going to drink, right? Like, it's not just, it broke me because to poison him, then it like I started to completely come undone. I was in this rage going through my house. I was like, out of some subconscious thing, I was like dumping all our liquids, all our ketchup, everything. So I was like, there's poison in it. There's poison. And then I was like, he's going to eliminate me. Like, my intelligence agency that I've served, and it broke. All the programming started to come undone. And I would sit outside, and I was staring at the weed killer. That was what he ordered me to do. And I was looking at the weed killer, and I remember for like 20 minutes, like, this is dangerous here. I'm going to move it. And then I would hide it for myself. And anyway, so that is what then broke everything. And I started to remember, and memories were bleeding through. And in essence, Darian screwed up big time. He went off protocol, and he ruined a really well-oiled machine. And now I'm exposing it, and so is Michael, because it happens. They'll target and it just happened to one of our friends actually that moved there, and we tried to warn. It wasn't as dangerous as ours, but so anyway, thank you for letting me spit all that out. You can tell I'm more animated because it's it's newer information and very, very
And probably
intense.
so frustrating. Like that could have ruined a relationship that you both had poured your heart and soul into.
Oh
And I
yeah,
love how supportive Michael was in understanding the
yeah,
situation. He didn't just abandon you at first thought
right,
of, oh my gosh, what's going on? He took the
yeah,
time to understand that this was, how you said, this was, an orchestrated
yeah,
operation where they were purposely activating you and having you do these things that you had no memory of until you
yeah,
did. And now
yeah,
you get to use all of that against them and expose it. And that's so wonderful. And I love that Michael's helping you do it and that you're
yeah,
both able to now have, you're both a unit. You're able to be stronger together now instead of being
yeah,
isolated again. It's just wonderful. I'm so happy that you have that, and good for you for exposing this. This needs exposed because
yeah,
these people have been doing this for a long time. That's why so
yeah.
many people continue to either not be able to speak out or they end up going back because there's these handlers, there's
Yes, yes,
programmers out there, and they, just like how I was saying, just like how, in a church there can be a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's like
yes.
that with people who you look at and depend on to tell you the truth, people in
Yeah.
personal development, people in these
Mm-hmm.
different corners of our community. Of
Yeah,
course, evil is going to, try to infiltrate that. Of course, the
yeah.
government is going to try to infiltrate our movements. They don't want us just running free, speaking
No.
freely
Yeah.
without any consequence. They're going to make it seem like, oh, you have these conferences you can go to. You're perfectly safe. You have all
Yes.
these safe leaders in the community. And then how you were saying, even being an asset, a lot of people don't have memories. They might know that something happened to them. Maybe they think that they were
Right.
abducted by
Right.
aliens. Maybe they remember being abused as a kid, don't make sense of it. They're
Mhm.
joining these communities to get information. And not only is it horrible that there's people activating them, but you think about these survivors that went through something like you did, who have self-harm programming. So if they're triggered the
Oh,
wrong way,
yes.
well, they can end up harming themselves or worse, and then
Oh, yeah.
it's just horrific to think like the dangers that people are putting themselves in, and that
Yeah.
people aren't aware of to help protect our community.
Yes. Yeah, and it's really good to have awareness and discernment, and, it's yeah, the nature, it's really the intelligence agencies are involved no matter what. And the thing is that truth is still allowed to come out, like I mentioned, because there are government agencies that need whistleblower testimonies to help them understand what happened. Um, but yeah, it's very dangerous, and yeah, and it's really, I try to be very, calm and not emotional and about things, but yeah, in essence, what this person has done to me and hundreds of other women. So he used to brag to Michael to say, "Oh yeah, I have," and we didn't understand at the time. He used to brag and say, "Oh yeah, I can enter a woman's dreams, and then 2 days later she'll want to come sleep with me." I mean, this is the type of person who's leading a spiritual movement. It's all fake. He is literally a puppet for intelligence agencies, and so you have to protect yourself. And yeah, if you visit these conferences, wear earplugs everywhere you go, wear some earphones, and make sure you have a watch on at all times to get missing time, and put a camera in your room so you can make sure. Oops, you're muted, or maybe my thing is.
Yep, I was muted.
Oh, there you
And
go.
also,
Okay.
I think having, a lot of people, I think, go to these things alone, thinking, well, I'm going to go by myself. Nobody in my life understands me. I'm going to find my community there. But I think,
Mhm.
too, having, one or two safe people there with you who can be there with you as witnesses
True.
for the whole
Oh
time,
yeah.
too.
Yes.
Because, like you said, you could end up going and then wake up the next morning and be like, what did I do last night? I don't remember, but I didn't
Yeah.
drink anything. I didn't take any drugs, but I have no
Yeah.
recollection of what happened. And it's just, I mean, it makes me so mad that this type of thing exists, because like our community, it's the most vulnerable people in the world. You guys are the strongest people, but there's so many people just coming out of it. It's like we're in
Yeah.
a really beautiful time where people are breaking programming way
Yes.
faster at a more rapid rate than usual, but we don't have resources for all of them yet. They're looking for resources. They're depending on these leaders in our community to keep them safe. And they're going into a slaughterhouse, essentially entering these arenas of,
Yes.
you know, self-help and disclosure and truth. And
Mhm.
it's just
Mhm.
really sad that they're being preyed on when they've gone through so much. Like what they need is healing and support and safety, and to actually be in rooms with people who care about them and their well-being.
Yeah.
And instead
Yeah.
you have these assets that are crawling. They're just, you know, slithering in like snakes and positioning themselves as
Absolutely.
leaders, or being placed as leaders and being elevated on purpose through the government,
Absolutely.
you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
and they don't
Yeah.
even know it. And it's just, or they know it, but the people that attend these don't know it. They just think, wow, I can't believe I'm here getting to listen to these people. And, you
Yeah.
know, we need to have more awareness of this. And I'm so proud of you and happy that you're speaking on it, because I don't think it's talked about enough. I think a lot of people are afraid to speak out against some of these people because they do have quote unquote followers or popularity or, you know, reverence to some degree. And I think a lot of people are scared to stand up to these people. And I hope that your testimony inspires others who have gone through this and who have been targeted by
Oh,
leaders
yes, and it's such a
to speak out.
it's such an embarrassing thing if you've gone through it, if you've been honeypotted yourself. Like, who are you going to tell? I mean, it's just a wonderful operation, because if it happens to you, you never want to talk about it. Um, yes, and I think being careful at the I was going to mention, yes, also we're working on, so on scion.com, we're working on a 7 or 8 video. So I'm artistic director there. And these are binaural and isochronic audio journeys that have the technology, which is beyond the scope of our meeting here. Could talk for like 30 minutes on it. The 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 frequencies that the binaurals and isochronics are set to are they are unique. No one else uses them. They are based largely on the golden ratio frequencies, that has to do with charge collapse, and the technology of Dr. Planck. But the how they are very efficient is how I can say it, and it's real. So this is binaurals, 10 times anything that you're going to find on the internet, on YouTube. Now, one thing they're very effective, and we're using what we call a military grade subliminal messaging. It's we put the whole score in, so you know what we're saying. But it's military grade, so it's what's in our TVs, it's what's in our radio, in our scrolling when we're going through Instagram. But it's positive affirmations that undo programming. So we have right now we're doing the whole website, and we'll be creating a lot, but we have like a successful mindset, esteem builder, managing grief, and they are effective. And we're finishing, it's going to take a while, but like a 7 or 8 video audio program for deprogramming for people who have been in programs. But also for everyone, because we all get programmed all day long on our media. So and it's going to be amazing. And the other thing I want to say is the journey of all this is so hard, because you really do want to have a community to talk to about everything you've been through. I remember, Kathy O'Brien, she said it to me, but she might also say it a lot in her videos, is that when you're remembering, it is a lonely journey, and it needs to be. It needs to be isolated from the world, so that your subconscious is not afraid to share with you at the moment so know that if you're going through memory work and you've been a survivor, there is a time of this loneliness where you're working with your memories. But that once the memories get solidified in your core system, then going out and building community and being very careful of your sovereignty, and being careful always in groups, big gatherings, concerts, conferences, whatever, pep rallies, everything. You need to preserve your your sovereignty. So by putting in earbuds or making sure you're careful who you connect with. And then you can also start building community. It comes, but knowing that it's better to be alone while you're figuring all this out than be out traveling, going to conferences. That's my advice. And, once you have it under wraps, then go and start. But, to each their own.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like you need to make a community like just around your little bubble. Do you have a friend or a
Yes.
spouse or
Yes.
a therapist that you trust? Like build that with somebody and then kind of expand outside of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's amazing. I'm going to put that website below for people who want to go check out the products and the binaurals that
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And your partner doing. I love that.
And before I keep kind of sidetracking, but the one area of your consciousness that has been hidden is how important your dream space is. And there's also some amazing dream products that we're coming out with to help not only awaken your lucidity, but to build protection. It has to be a serious journey for yourself to expand your awareness in your dream world, which is called lucidity, but also to be preventing other entities and agencies from programming this space. After this all went down and we found out and we were on the fallout, Darian and his group still kept attacking our dreams for months. And we found out, I now know when he's in my dream space. It's happened so much that I can see there's a signature in his eyes that I can see that gives it away. He cloaks himself as someone that you know. And many of my dreamers who are survivors also have this. It's like an attack in their dream. And he would debilitate us. They know, the agency knows your biggest fears. They know your biggest weaknesses, and they capitalize that on in your dream space to keep you immobilized and weak. And finally, both Michael and I started fighting back. So instead of just protecting our space, we also went out on targets and started targeting him and his group. And we're not doing that anymore, but I'll tell you, it felt amazing to be able to flex your muscle and say, stay out of my space, So it's real. And the dream space is not, if it can be influenced by your TV if you're sleeping at night, your phone, they can send frequencies. It can be agencies if you're being harassed by agencies. And also in a more spiritual sense, demonics can also, that's their favorite playground, is your dream space. And of course, if you can clear them out and make room, it makes room for benevolent beings to come and start working with you in a profound way. And many of my dreamers are already there, like they're speaking to, angels and ancestors and soul family every night, but they have sovereignty over their dream space. So it's a very important journey.
Wow. Would you be willing to come on and do like a whole episode on like dreams, remote viewing, and sort of this like, other side of your life that you've now researched and kind of honed in? I think that would be really empowering for people and also fascinating. This is like kind of a realm that's not talked about a lot.
I know. It's not surprising because it's so powerful. They don't want you to know. Yeah.
But I've heard so many times in testimony how people were targeted in their sleep. And we even know that MK Ultra, for example, works with brainwave frequencies. There are alpha, beta, theta, so frequencies and like these different brainwaves, including sleep state, are very, very powerful. And of course, they know everything about it and can figure out how to infiltrate it and how to enter your space, even whenever you think like, oh, I'm just sleeping, like it's fine. Yeah. I think it would be a really fascinating episode to help empower people who are dealing with this, and then to also educate, people like me who didn't grow up or knowing this information, that it's out there, and that, we can all be targeted. You don't have to have had your upbringing for, targeting, like you said, through the TV or through phones or through frequencies. to impact us while we sleep. And we know sleep is so important, and we need to optimize that to be a positive, safe space for us. So I'd love
Yes.
to like just have a whole focus episode on your remote viewing that you've done and
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
and the work that you're doing, discovering the dream world, and kind of how it can be infiltrated and how we can empower people to take their power back.
Yes, I would love to do that. And the positive side of all that too is that when you have control of your dream space, it's a powerful platform for example, manifestation. So you can plant subconscious seeds in your own mind to, if you need to get a new job, like, or something's happening in your life and you need to figure out a solution in the waking realm. The dream realm is where you can start by altering and planting seeds for your subconscious. And we've proven it. I've had people find things in their waking day that I've planted in their dreams, and then they find it the next day. It's very a wonderful realm. It's not all scary. It's just building your awareness there is key. And yeah, I have a lot of research I'd love to share on a different. And the remote viewing, I encourage everyone to remote view because it trains your left and right hemispheres of the brain to speak in a very efficient way, to gather data from the unseen. And it trains it. So psychic readings, I trained as well, and I was validated when I was doing psychic readings, that my data was real. But the remote viewing is different. It's a clinical way to train that gift, that psychic gift. And in my book, I have a lot of my most, like, my best remote viewings. I think they're in the back of the book here. And I recommend everybody do it.
And then let's remind people all the social media platforms that you're on and your websites, your book. And then I'll have all of it in the show notes, but I'll show it on the screen too for people.
Sure. I mean, I've forced myself to become, visible. It's a lot of work. I'm a very private person, but the universe has really pushed me to go on. So I'm on all the TikTok, Instagram, Patreon, X, and Facebook. You can find me there too. And then I'm artistic director of scion.com, and you can find all of my personal info on spacemystic.com. And I've also created a third website, dreamdisclosure.com, that has access and links to get you to my dream community as well.
And then her book is on Amazon. Again, it's called Out of Sight.
Yes. The best way to find the book is to go to my website, spacemystic.com, and there's a link there. It's hard to find in the algorithms because it's a newer book, and I was largely not on social media back then. So that's the easiest way, is to find it, or put the link if there's a link in the description box.
Perfect. I'll have all of that below. Like Veronika said, she's on many social media platforms, so go support her. I know, a lot of you reach out and ask what you can do to support, and really the best thing that you can do, the easiest thing, is just go follow survivors and their work on social media. Share it. It's something free that you can do. It takes no time. You're likely already on social media. Buy their book, give it to a friend, or add it to your library. That's a really easy and affordable way to support. And then, of course, if you're looking for any of these services, if you're looking to connect with communities, join communities like Veronika's on Patreon. You can do it for free, or there's upgrades if you guys want to participate in some of the other features that Veronika devotes more of her time and energy to on a more personal level. Get her books, go support her, get her services from her website, reach out to her, encourage her. A lot of this stuff is very easy. There's very, very easy ways that you can support. It doesn't have to be something that takes up tons of time or energy or even finances. There's lots of really easy, affordable ways that you guys can support. And Veronika has every single way possible that you guys can do this. So I really encourage you guys to go lift her up, go support her, go follow her on social media, share her videos on YouTube and her Patreon link, and encourage people to join. Go take her up on the remote viewing platform that she recommended. I'll have that in the show notes if that's something that you guys are interested in. And Veronika, I just want to thank you with all my heart for being here with us today, and for sharing so much of your story, for all these vulnerable moments, and for, just all the work that you've done for our community. I'm just amazed that you've sort of just kind of started this journey. You haven't been with Slip Growing for 25 years, but you've done 25 years of work in such a short amount of time. So I'm really amazed. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for you. I'm excited you're writing more books, that you're growing your community, adding more services, and just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for not only carrying your testimony and sharing it, but for offering your arms and your empathy and your heart for other people to come to you for healing, help, hope, and compassion. And I'm really excited to have you on for another episode. Thank you with all my heart for coming on today.
Thank you. And thank you for having this very safe space for all of us. It's really important. And I'm honored to be here.
And we're honored to have you. And again, for everybody listening, Veronika's info will be down below in the show notes in the description box. I'll have all my info there too. We couldn't do this without you guys. You guys are really the catalyst for all this information to get out, and we appreciate your support so much. So keep supporting you guys, keep uplifting every guest on the show. Go support them, go share all their information, and of course buy their books and participate in the services that they offer. So you guys, thank you so much for listening. Bless you all, and we will see you next time.